attack on Soleimani, the attack on al-Baghdadi, and the obliteration and decimation of the Iran nuclear sites just recently in an operation known as Midnight Hammer, all perfectly executed and done. No nation in the world could achieve what America achieved yesterday, or frankly, in just a short period of time. All Venezuelan military capacities were rendered powerless as the men and women of our military, working with U.S. law enforcement, successfully captured Maduro in the dead of night. It was dark. The lights of Caracas were largely turned off due to a certain expertise that we have. It was dark and it was deadly. But captured along with his wife, Celia Flores, both of whom now face American justice. Maduro and Flores have been indicted in the Southern District of New York, it's Jay Clayton, for their campaign of deadly narco-terrorism against the United States and its citizens. I want to thank the men and women of our military who achieved such an extraordinary success overnight with breathtaking speed, power, precision, and competence. You rarely see anything like it. You've seen some raids in this country that didn't go so well. They were an embarrassment. If you look back to Afghanistan, or if you look back to the Jimmy Carter days, they were different days. We're a respected country again, maybe like never before. These highly trained warriors operating in collaboration with U.S. law enforcement caught them in a very ready position. They were waiting for us. They knew we had many ships out in the sea, just sort of waiting. They knew we were coming. So they were in a ready, what's called a ready position, but they were completely overwhelmed and very quickly incapacitated. If you would have seen what I saw last night, you would have been very impressed. I'm not sure that you'll ever get to see it, but it was an incredible thing to see. Not a single American service member was killed, and not a single piece of American equipment was lost. We had many helicopters, many planes, many people involved in that fight. But think of that, not one piece of military equipment was lost, not one service member was, more importantly, killed. The United States military is the strongest and most fearsome military on the planet by far, with capabilities and skills our enemies can scarcely begin to imagine. We have the best equipment anywhere in the world. There's no equipment like what we have. And you see that even if you just look at the boats. You know, we've knocked out 97% of the drugs coming in by sea. 90%. Each boat kills on average, 25,000 people. We knocked out 97%. And those drugs mostly come from a place called Venezuela. We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in, and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years. So we are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious.
Okay, so you really are.
And it has to be judicious, because that's what we're all about. We want peace, liberty, and justice for the great people of Venezuela. And that includes many from Venezuela that are now living in the United States and want to go back to their country. It's their homeland. We can't take a chance that somebody else takes over Venezuela that doesn't have the good of the Venezuelan people in mind. We've had decades of that. We're not going to let that happen. We're there now, and what people don't understand, but they understand as I say this, we're there now, but we're going to stay until such time as the proper transition can take place. So we're going to stay until such time as we're going to run it essentially until such time as a proper transition can take place. As everyone knows, the oil business in Venezuela has been a bust, a total bust for a long period of time. They were pumping almost nothing by comparison to what they could have been pumping and what could have taken place. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. And we are ready to stage a second and much larger attack if we need to do so. So we were prepared to do a second wave if we needed to do so. We actually assumed that a second wave would be necessary, but now it's probably not. The first wave, if you'd like to call it that, the first attack was so successful, we probably don't have to do a second, but we're prepared to do a second wave, a much bigger wave, actually. This was pinpoint, but we have a much bigger wave that probably won't have to do. This partnership of Venezuela with the United States of America, a country that everybody wants to be involved with because of what we were able to do and accomplish, will make the people of Venezuela rich, independent, and safe. And it will also make the many, many people from Venezuela that are living in the United States extremely happy. They suffered. They suffered. So much was taken from them. They're not going to suffer anymore. The illegitimate dictator Maduro was the kingpin of a vast criminal network responsible for trafficking colossal amounts of deadly and illicit drugs into the United States. As alleged in the indictment, he personally oversaw the vicious cartel known as Cartel de las Solas, which flooded our nation with lethal poison, responsible for the deaths of countless Americans, the many, many Americans, hundreds of thousands over the years of Americans died because of him. Maduro and his wife will soon face the full might of American justice and stand trial on American soil. Right now, they're on a ship they'll be heading to, ultimately, New York, and then a decision will be made, I assume, between New York and Miami or Florida. But we have people where the overwhelming evidence of their crimes will be presented in a court of law. And I've seen it. I've seen what we have. It's both horrible and breathtaking that something like this could have been allowed to take place. For many years after his term as president of Venezuela expired, Maduro remained in power and waged a ceaseless campaign of violence, terror, and subversion against the United States of America, threatening not only our people, but the stability of the entire region. And you all saw it. In addition to trafficking gigantic amounts of illegal drugs that inflicted untold suffering and human destruction all over the country, all over, in particular, the United States, Maduro sent savage and murderous gangs, including the bloodthirsty prison gang, Tren de Aragua, to terrorize American communities nationwide. And he did indeed. They were in Colorado. They took over apartment complexes. They cut the fingers off people if they called police. They were brutal, but they're not so brutal now. And I just have to congratulate our military, Pete and everybody, and our National Guard, because the job that they've done, whether it's in Washington, D.C., where we have a totally safe city, where it was one of the most unsafe cities anywhere in the world, frankly, and now we have no crime in Washington, D.C. We haven't had a killing. We had the terrorist
Sorry, I was there.
attack a few weeks ago.
Yeah, that's not true.
A little bit of a different kind of a threat, but we haven't had a killing in a long period of time, 6-7 months. We used to have two, on average, 2 a week. in Washington, our capital. We don't have that anymore. The
Mhm.
restaurants are opening. Everyone's happy. They're going, they're walking their daughters, they're walking their
So I've got,
children,
like, a
their
bug
wives, they
flying around.
walk
It's
to
distracting.
restaurants. Restaurants are opening all over Washington, D.C. So I want to thank the National Guard. I want to thank our military. And I want to thank law enforcement. Been amazing. And they should do it with more cities. We're doing it, as you know, and we're doing it in Memphis, Tennessee right now, and crime is down. We've just sort of started a few weeks ago, but
Why
crime
can't
is
he
down
just
now
stay on topic?
77%. And the governor of Louisiana called, great person.
Sorry, guys, I don't
He wanted
know.
us
I
to
don't have
help
many
him, as
thoughts
you
on
know, in
Louisiana
a
State law
certain very
enforcement.
nice part
I mean,
of
actually, really want to go to Mardi Gras.
Louisiana, and we have done that. And it was a rough
It's
section,
frustrating.
and we have
Neil
climbed
should.
down. I understand it's down to almost nothing already after
No,
2.5 weeks.
Rubio's
New
absolutely.
Orleans, it's down to
He's
almost
shoving it.
nothing,
I do
and
look
we've
at the
only
way
been
they
there for
cower
two and
next
a
to
half
him. Like,
weeks.
they all stand.
Can't imagine why
it's like
governors wouldn't
schoolboys
want
around
us to
the
help.
bully.
We
They
also
just stand
helped,
there
as
very
you
sort
know,
of
in
like,
Chicago.
except when
The
he's not
crime went
around
down a
Trump.
little bit there. We did a very small help
When
because
he's
we had
around, he's quite like timid.
we had no working ability with the governor. The governor was a disaster, and the mayor was a disaster. But
They always
it
cringe
knocked
when he
down
starts
crime. But
going
we're pulling
funny
out of there
tangents.
when they need us. We'll know. You'll know. You'll be writing about it.
Maybe.
And likewise, Los
Yeah,
Angeles,
he will
where
mention
we
Biden
saved
soon.
Los
Yeah,
Angeles
yeah.
early
I'd
on,
be interested if he
where
mentioned
the
Russia, China,
head of the police
or Iran.
department made a statement that if the federal government didn't come in, we would have lost Los Angeles. That's long after the fires. That's when they had the riots in Los Angeles. We did a great job. Got no credit for it whatsoever, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. We don't need the credit. But we'll be pulling out when they need us. They'll call, or we'll go back if we have to. We'll go back. But we did a great job in various cities. But the place that we're very proud of is Washington, D.C., because it's our nation's capital. We took it from being a crime-ridden mess to being one of the safest cities in the country. But the gangs that they sent raped, tortured, and murdered American women and children. They were in all of the cities I mentioned, Tren de Aragua. And they were sent by Maduro to terrorize our people. And now Maduro will never again be able to threaten an American citizen or anybody from Venezuela. There will no longer be threats. For years, I've highlighted the stories of those innocent Americans whose lives were so heartlessly robbed by this Venezuelan terrorist organization. Really one of the worst. One of the worst, they say the worst. Americans like 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungari from Houston. Beautiful Jocelyn Nungari, what happened to her? They, as you know, they kidnapped, assaulted, and murdered by Tren de Aragua animals. They murdered Jocelyn and left her dead under the bridge. There was a bridge that will never be the same to so many people after seeing what happened. As I've said many times, the Maduro regime emptied out their prisons, sent their worst and most violent monsters into the United States to steal American lives. And they came from mental institutions and insane asylums. They came from prisons and jails. The reason I say both, they sound similar. Actually, prisons, a little bit more hostile, a little bit tougher. A mental institution isn't as tough as an insane asylum, but we got them both. They sent from their mental institutions. They sent from their jails, prisons. They were drug dealers. They were drug kingpins. They sent everybody bad into the United States, but no longer. And we have now a border where nobody gets through. In addition, Venezuela unilaterally seized and stole American oil, American assets, and American platforms, costing us billions and billions of dollars. They did this a while ago, but we never had a president that did anything about it. They took all of our property. It was our property. We built it. And we never had a president that decided to do anything about it. Instead, they fought wars that were 10,000 miles away. We built Venezuela oil industry with American talent, drive, and skill. And the socialist regime stole it from us during those previous administrations, and they stole it through force. This constituted one of the largest thefts of American property in the history of our country, considered the largest theft of property in the history of our country. Massive oil infrastructure was taken like we were babies, and we didn't do anything about it. I would have done something about it.
Awesome.
America will never allow foreign powers to rob our people or drive us back into and out of our own hemisphere. That's what they did. Furthermore, under the now deposed dictator Maduro, Venezuela was increasingly hosting foreign adversaries in our region and acquiring menacing offensive weapons that could threaten U.S. interests and lives. And they used those weapons last night. Potentially in league with the cartels operating along our border. All of these actions were in gross violation of the core principles of American foreign policy, dating back more than 2 centuries. And not anymore. All the way back, it dated to the Monroe Doctrines. And the Monroe Doctrine is a big deal, but we've superseded it by a lot, by a real lot. They now call it the Donroe Document. I don't know. It's
seriously
Monroe Doctrine.
Oh my God.
We sort of forgot about it. It was very important, but we forgot about it. We don't forget about it anymore. Under our new national security strategy, American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again. Won't happen. So just in concluding, for decades, other administrations have neglected or even contributed to these growing security threats in the Western Hemisphere. Under the Trump administration, we are reasserting American power in a very powerful way in our home region. And our home region is very different than it was just a short while ago. The future will be, and we did this in my first powerful way, in our home region. And our home region, our greater dominance right now. Everyone's coming back to us. The future will be determined by the ability to protect commerce and territory and resources that are core to national security. These are core to our national security. Just like tariffs are, they've made our country rich, and they've made our national security stronger than ever before. But these are the iron laws that have always determined global power. And we're going to keep it that way. We will secure our borders. We will stop the terrorists. We will crash the cartels, and we will defend our citizens against all threats, foreign and domestic. Other presidents may have lacked the courage or whatever to defend America, but I will never allow terrorists and criminals to operate with impunity against the United States. This extremely successful operation should serve as warning to anyone who would threaten American sovereignty or endanger American lives. Very importantly, the embargo on all Venezuelan oil remains in full effect. The American Armada remains poised in position, and the United States retains all military options until United States demands have been fully met and fully satisfied. All political and military figures in Venezuela should understand what happened to Maduro can happen to them, and it will happen to them if they aren't just fair, even to their people. The dictator and terrorist, Maduro, is finally gone in Venezuela. People are free. They're free again. It's been a long time for them, but they're free. America is a safer nation this morning. It's a prouder nation this morning because it didn't allow this horrible person and this country that was doing very bad things to us. It didn't allow it to happen. And the Western Hemisphere is right now a much safer place to be. So I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank General Raisin Kane. He's a fantastic man. I've worked with a lot of generals. I worked with some I didn't like. I worked with some I didn't respect. I worked with some that just weren't good. But this guy is fantastic. I watched last night one of the most precise attacks on sovereignty. I mean, it was an attack for justice. And I'm very proud of him. And I'm very proud of our Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, who I'm going to ask to say a few words. Thank you very much.
Can you explain how the U.S. will run Venezuela?
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Finally, a commander-in-chief the world respects and the American people deserve.
Oh,
As the
just ask
president
the
said,
question, you
words can
sycophant.
barely capture the bravery and the power and the precision of this historic operation. A massive joint military and law enforcement raid flawlessly executed by the greatest Americans our country has to offer. American warriors are second to none, the best in the world and the best of our country. What all of us witnessed last night
I
was
thought it was
sheer
I thought it was a
grit,
journalist. Sorry,
gallantry, and
I thought
glory
it was a
of the
journalist.
American warrior.
It
simply
sounded so
humbled
like brown. I
by
wonder if
such
he's
men,
wiped all the shit off his
and I
nose
tip my
from
hat
brown-nosing
to our
the
chairman,
heart.
Dan Raisin Kane, and all those Americans
Everyone.
who stood watch last night. Our warriors are the elite of America, and again, President Trump has your back. No other country on planet Earth, and it's not even close, could pull this kind of operation off. And no other president has ever shown this kind of leadership, courage, and resolve, the most powerful combination the world has ever seen. As the president said, our adversaries remain on notice. America can project our will anywhere, anytime. The coordination, the stealth, the lethality, the precision, the very long arm of American justice, all on full display in the middle of the night. Nicolas Maduro had his chance, just like Iran had their chance, until they didn't and until he didn't. He effed around and he found out. President Trump is deadly serious about stopping the
This
flow
is an
of
official
feelings of violence to our
public
country.
official.
Deadly serious
public
about
official.
stopping
Sorry,
the flow
guys,
of
obviously
drugs
my
and
my
poison
bad.
to our people. Deadly serious about
Effed
getting
around
back
in front
the
of- come
oil
on,
that was
man, that's
stolen
cool.
from us. And deadly serious about reestablishing American deterrence and dominance in the Western
Yep.
Hemisphere.
Yeah.
This is about the
Oh, no,
safety,
not that one. I meant that one.
security, freedom, and prosperity of the American people. This is America first. This is peace through strength. And the United States War Department is proud to help deliver it. Welcome to 2026. And under President Trump, America is back. I'd like to welcome now our
It never
chairman,
went anywhere.
Raisin Kane, to give.
I don't think
a few more
anyone was
details about that.
questioning American military prowess.
Thank you.
I guess the
thank you, Mr.
renaming of
Secretary.
it
Thank
from
you,
Department of
Mr.
Defense to
President,
War was,
and good
well,
morning. Last night,
necessary.
on the order of the President of the United States and in support of a
Okay, this is
request
actually
from the
interesting. Yeah.
Department of Justice, as the President said, the United States military conducted an apprehension mission in Caracas, Venezuela, to bring to justice two indicted persons, Nicolas and Cecilia Maduro. This operation, known as Operation Absolute Resolve, was discreet, precise, and conducted during the darkest hours of January 2nd, and was the culmination of months of planning and rehearsal, an operation that, frankly, only the United States military could undertake. What I'd like to do this morning is talk to you through some of the preparation and the details without compromising any of our tactics, techniques, and procedures. There is always a chance that we'll be tasked to do this type of mission again. Our interagency work began months ago and built on decades of experience of integrating complex air, ground, space, and maritime operations. While the past 2 decades have honed the skills of our special operations forces, this particular mission required every component of our joint force, with soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians working in unison with our intelligence agency partners and law enforcement teammates in an unprecedented operation. We leveraged our unmatched intelligence capabilities and our years of experience in hunting terrorists. And we could not have done this mission without the incredible work by various intelligence agencies, including the CIA, NSA, and NGA. We watched, we waited, we prepared, we remained patient and professional. This mission was meticulously planned, drawing lessons from decades of missions over the last many years, many missions over these last many years. This was an audacious operation that only the United States could do.
it required the utmost of precision and integration within our joint force. And the word integration does not explain the sheer complexity of such a mission. An extraction so precise, it involved more than 150 aircraft launching across the Western Hemisphere in close coordination, all coming together in time and place to layer effects for a single purpose, to get an interdiction force into downtown Caracas while maintaining the element of tactical surprise. Failure of one component of this well-oiled machine would have endangered the entire mission, and failure is never an option for America's joint force. Those in the air over Caracas last night were willing to give their lives for those on the ground and in the helicopters. Let me talk a little bit about the preparation. After months of work by our intelligence teammates to find Maduro and understand how he moved, where he lived, where he traveled, what he ate, what he wore, what were his pets. In early December, our force was set pending a series of aligned events. Key was choosing the right day to minimize the potential for civilian harm and maximize the element of surprise and minimize the harm to the indicted personnel. So as the president said, they could be brought to justice. And as the president said earlier today, weather in Venezuela is always a factor this time of the year. And over the weeks through Christmas and New Year's, the men and women of the United States military sat ready, patiently waiting for the right triggers to be met and the president to order us into action. Last night, the weather broke just enough, clearing a path that only the most skilled aviators in the world could maneuver through. Ocean, mountain, low cloud ceilings. But when tasked with a mission, this organization does not quit. At 10:46 p.m. Eastern time last night, the president ordered the United States military to move forward with this mission. He said to us, and we appreciate it, Mr. President, good luck and Godspeed. And those words were transmitted to the entire joint force. Over the course of the night, aircraft began launching from 20 different bases on land and sea across the Western Hemisphere. In total, more than 150 aircraft, bombers, fighters, intelligence, reconnaissance, surveillance, rotary wing were in the air last night. Thousands and thousands of hours of experience were airborne. Our youngest crew member was 20, and our oldest crew member was 49, and there's simply no match for American military might. As the night began, the helicopters took off with the extraction force, which included law enforcement officers, and began their flight into Venezuela at 100 feet above the water. As they approached Venezuelan shores, the United States began layering different effects provided by Spacecom, Cybercom, and other members of the interagency to create a pathway. Overhead, those forces were protected by aircraft from the United States Marines, the United States Navy, the United States Air Force, and the Air National Guard. The force included F-22s, F-35s, F-18s, EA-18s, E-2s, B-1 bombers, and other support aircraft, as well as numerous remotely piloted drones. As the force began to approach Caracas, the Joint Air Component began dismantling and disabling the air defense systems in Venezuela, employing weapons to ensure the safe passage of the helicopters into the target area. The goal of our air component was, and always will be to protect the helicopters and the ground force and get them to the target and get them home. As the force crossed the last point of high terrain where they'd been hiding in the clutter, we assessed that we had maintained totally the element of surprise. As the helicopter force ingressed towards the objective at low level, we arrived at Maduro's compound at 1:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or 2:01 a.m. Caracas local time, and the apprehension force descended into Maduro's compound and moved with speed, precision, and discipline towards their objective, and isolated the area to ensure the safety and security of the ground force while apprehending the indicted persons. On arrival into the target area, the helicopters came under fire, and they replied with that fire with overwhelming force in self-defense. One of our aircraft was hit, but remained flyable. And as the president said
A little
earlier
bit
today,
loosely
all of
used
our
there.
aircraft came home, and that aircraft remained flyable during the rest of the mission. As the operation unfolded at the compound, our air and ground intelligence teams provided real-time updates to the ground force, ensuring those forces could safely navigate the complex environment without unnecessary risk. The force remained protected by overhead tactical aviation. Maduro and his wife, both indicted, gave up and were taken into custody by the Department of Justice, assisted by our incredible U.S. military with professionalism and precision, with no loss of U.S. life. After securing the indicted persons, the force began to prep for departure. Helicopters were called in to exfiltrate the extraction force, while fighter aircraft and remotely piloted aircraft provided overhead coverage and suppressive fire. There were multiple self-defense engagements as the force began to withdraw out of Venezuela. The force successfully exfiltrated and returned to their afloat launch bases, and the force was over the water at 3:29 a.m.
Less than
Eastern
90
Standard Time
minutes.
with indicted persons on board. And both Maduro and his wife were embarked aboard the USS Iwo Jima. In closing, what we've witnessed today is a powerful demonstration of America's joint force. We think, we develop, we train, we rehearse, we debrief, we rehearse again and again, not to get it right, but to ensure that we cannot get it wrong. Our jobs are to integrate combat power so when the order comes, we can deliver overwhelming force at the time and the place of our choosing against any foe anywhere in the world. I am immensely proud today of our joint force and filled with gratitude to represent them here today. There is simply no mission too difficult for these incredible professionals and the families that stand by them and support them. As we stand here this morning, our forces remain in the region at a high state of readiness, prepared to project power, defend themselves, and our interests in the region. This operation is a testament to the dedication and unwavering commitment to justice and our resolve to hold accountable those who threaten peace and stability. In closing, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to the brave men and women who executed this mission. Their courage and tireless commitment to our nation are what makes us strong. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you, Mr. President.
Well, I don't have much to add to what you've heard now, other than the following points. Nicolas Maduro was indicted in 2020 in the United States. He is not the legitimate president of Venezuela. That's not just us saying it. The first Trump administration, the Biden administration, the second Trump administration, none of those three recognized him. He's not recognized by the European Union and multiple countries around the world. He is a fugitive of American justice with a $50 million reward,
You're not screwing around
which
with
I guess
his
they saved $50 million. And
Make sure.
yeah, exactly. But
Don't let anybody claim it. Nobody deserves it but us.
But I want to be clear about one thing. Nicolas Maduro had multiple opportunities to avoid this. He was provided multiple very, very, very generous offers and chose instead to act like a wild man, chose instead to play around. And the result is what we saw tonight. The other message here is the following. You have a guy, like many people around the world, they like to play games. You have a guy who decides he's going to invite Iran into his country, is going to, do the confiscation of American oil companies, is going to flood our country with gang members, is going to take Americans prisoner and try to hold them for hostage and trade them like he was able to do with the Biden administration. Basically likes to play games all this time and thinks nothing's going to happen. And I hope what people now understand is that we have a president. The 47th president of the United States is not a game player. When he tells you that he's going to do something, when tells you he's going to address a problem, he means it. He actions it. I can tell you, I've watched this process now for 14, 15 years, been around it. Everybody talks. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. When I get there, we're going to do this. We're going to take. This is a president of action. Like, I don't understand yet how they haven't figured this out. And now, if you don't know, now you know, because this is the way it's going to play out. And I think people need to understand that this is not a president that just talks and does letters and press conferences. And, you know, if he says he's serious about something, he means it. And this is something that was a direct threat to the national interest of the United States. And the president addressed it. There's a president of peace, by the way. I told you what I just said earlier. This guy had multiple opportunities to find his way somewhere else and figure out another. He could have been living somewhere else right now, very happy, but instead he wanted to play big boy. And so now, you know, he's got other sets of problems on his hands. And, but I think that the message here should be for the world. Look, the president doesn't go out looking for people to pick fights with. He's not, generally wants to get along with everybody. We'll talk and meet with anybody, but don't play games. Don't play games with this president's in office, because it's not going to turn out well. And so I hope that, you know,
It's interesting just
I
how
guess,
much Rubio's just
that lesson was
pre-balling
learned
it,
last night,
restarting
and,
compared to
and
many
we
of the
hope it'll be
others, which are a lot more
instructive going
scripted.
Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Mr. President.
you said that the U.S. is going to run Venezuela. So who's in power right now?
Well, we're going to be running it with a group, and we're going to make sure it's run properly. We're going to rebuild the oil infrastructure, which will cost billions of dollars. It'll be paid for by the oil companies directly. They will be reimbursed for what they're doing, but that's going to be paid. And we're going to get the oil flowing the way it should be. As you know, it was just a minor flow. It was actually a minor flow for what they have. But we're going to run it properly, and we're going to make sure the people of Venezuela are taken care of. We're going to make sure the people that were forced out of Venezuela by this thug are also taken care of.
Mr. President, does the U.S. running the country mean that U.S. troops will be on the ground? How will that work?
Well, you know, they always say boots on the ground. Oh, so we're not afraid of boots on the ground if we have to have. We had boots on the ground last night at a very high level, actually.
Forever president, forever
we don't mind saying
pending, forever war president,
but,
guys.
we're going to make sure that that country is run properly. We're not doing this in vain. This is a very dangerous attack. This is an attack that could have gone very, very badly. Could have gone very badly. We could have lost a lot of people last night. We could have lost a lot of dignity. We could have lost a lot of equipment. The equipment is less important, but we could have lost a lot. And we're going to make sure that this is proper. We're there now. We're ready to go again if we have to. We're going to run the country right. It's going to be run very judiciously, very fairly. It's going to make a lot of money. We're going to give money to the people. We're going to reimburse people that were taken advantage of. We're going to take care of everybody. It's very important. We couldn't let them get away with it. You know, they stole our oil. We built that whole industry there, and they just took it over like we were nothing. And we had a president that decided not to do anything about it. So we did something about it. We're late, but we did something about it. Yeah, please.
Can you explain the exact mechanism by which you're going to run the country? Are you going to designate a U.S. official to coordinate?
It's all being done right now. We're designating people. We're talking to people. We're designating various people, and we're going to let you know who those people are.
That would run Venezuela.
Well, it's largely going to be for a period of time, the people that are standing right behind me. We're going to be running it. We're going to be bringing it back. It's a dead, you know, I talk about a dead country. A year and a half ago, we were a dead country. Now we're the hottest country anywhere in the world. We're a country doing better than any country anywhere in the world. And it required leadership.
How are those
Venezuela
food
has
prices, mate?
a lot of bad
those egg
people in
prices?
there, a lot of bad people that shouldn't be leading. We're not going to take a chance that one of those people take over for Maduro. So you can look at, and others, we have fantastic people, including people in the military. So we're going to have a group of people running it until such time as it can be put back on track, make a lot of money for the people, and give people a great way of life, and also reimbursement for people in our country that were forced out of Venezuela.
Rubio would be.
You said earlier today that you weren't going to back Machado to come back and be the opposition leader in your Fox and Friends interview. And then you also mentioned the vice president of Venezuela. Are you going to work with the vice president of Venezuela, or how do you foresee the relationship
Well, I
going?
understand she was just sworn in, but she was, as you know, picked by Maduro. So Marco's working on that directly. He's just had a conversation with her, and she's essentially willing to do what we think is necessary to make Venezuela great again. Very simple.
How long
Mr. President, Colombian President Gustavo Petro, a couple weeks ago, he said he's got to watch his ass. And today he said he's not concerned about anything happening to him in the aftermath of this operation. So just what your message is
Well,
about
he
that.
has cocaine mills. He has factories where he makes cocaine. And yeah, I think I stick by my first statement. He's making cocaine. They're sending it into the United States. So he does have to watch his ass.
Mr. President, did you notify any members of Congress in advance?
Marco, do you want to talk about that? Because you were involved.
I actually want to listen to
Congress,
Rubio.
This was not the kind of mission that you can do congressional notification on. It was a trigger-based mission in which conditions had to be met night after night. We watched and monitored that for a number of days. So it's just simply not the kind of mission you can call people and say, hey, we may do this at some point in the next 15 days. But it's largely a law enforcement function. Remember, at the end of the day, at its core, this was an arrest of 2 indicted fugitives of American justice, and the Department of War supported the Department of Justice in that job. Now, there are broader policy implications here, but it's just not the kind of mission that you can pre-notify because it endangers the mission.
Plus, if I could add one thing to that, Congress has a tendency to leak. This would not be good. If they leaked, General, I think it would have been maybe a very different
Is he
result.
seriously trying to undermine?
I have to say, they knew we were coming at some point. We had a lot of ships out there. They sort of knew we were coming. We weren't. But Congress will leak, and we don't want leakers.
Mr. President, you were one of the only people to watch this all play out live. What was Maduro doing when the U.S. forces entered what I assume would be his home? And also, was there any point where the U.S. was considering if Maduro pushed back or resisted killing Maduro?
It could have happened. It could have happened. He was trying to get into a safe place. You know what a safe place is? All steel.
Safe
And
house.
he wasn't able to make it to the door because our guys were so fast. They went through the opposition so fast. And there was a lot of opposition. People were wondering, do we get them by surprise? Sort of surprised, but they were waiting for something. It was a lot of opposition. There was a lot of gunfire. You saw some of it today. But he was trying to get to a safe place, which wasn't safe because we would have had the door blown up in about 47 seconds, they say on average, regardless of how thick the steel was. It was a very thick door. It was a very heavy door, but he was unable to get to that door. He made it to the door. He was unable to close it. Go ahead, finish.
Where is Maduro going to be in the time being right now? Do you know his exact
Well,
whereabouts?
eventually, ultimately, in the near future, he's going to be brought to New York.
And where is he going to be held? Where is he going to be held in New York? Do you know?
That's going to be up to the officials that do these things.
Mr. President, the U.S. has something of a mixed track record of ousting dictators without necessarily a plan for what comes afterwards.
Not with
Did
me,
that weigh on your decision?
Well, that's when we had different presidents, but with me, that's not true. With me, we've had a perfect track record of winning. We win a lot, and we win. If you look at Soleimani, you look at al-Baghdadi, you look at the Midnight Hammer. Midnight Hammer was incredible. Right now, you wouldn't have peace in the Middle East. We have essentially peace in the Middle East because of that. If we weren't successful with Midnight Hammer, you wouldn't have peace in the Middle East. So with me, you've had a lot of victory. You've had only victories. You've had no losses. Yeah.
President, can you? How long do you expect the U.S. to run Venezuela, and how soon do you want Venezuelan people to hold elections?
So I'd like to do it quickly, but it takes a period of time. We're rebuilding. We have to rebuild their whole infrastructure. The infrastructure is rotted. It's actually very dangerous. It's blow up territory. Oil is very dangerous. It's a very dangerous thing to take out of the ground. Can kill a lot of people. It has killed a lot of people doing just that. The infrastructure is old. It's rotted. Much of it is stuff that we put there 25 years ago, and we're going to be replacing it. And we're going to take a lot of money out so that we can take care of the country. Yeah.
Are you saying that Secretary Rubio and
Mr. President, China, Russia, and Iran have interests in Venezuela. How does this operation affect your relationships with them when it comes to the oil and drugs?
And Russia, Russia when we get things straightened out. But in terms of other countries that want oil, we're in the oil business. We're going to sell it to them. We're not going to say we're not going to give it to them. In other words, we'll be selling oil probably in much larger doses because they couldn't produce very much because their infrastructure was so bad. So we'll be selling large amounts of oil to other countries, many of whom are using it now, but I would say many more will come.
Are you saying, Mr. President, are you saying that, Mr. President, are you saying that,
Mr. President, thank you. What is your message to the people of Venezuela today? Of course, the civilian population specifically, they have a lot of questions. What is your message to the people of
That
Venezuela?
you're going to have peace, justice. You're going to have some of the riches that you should have had for a long period of time. It was stolen from you. But you're going to have peace and you're going to have safety. You're going to have justice. You're going to have a country. You're going to have a real country. You're going to have potentially a great country. You know, if you go back 20 years, maybe even a little longer ago, that was a great country and they destroyed it. Remember I said that if we lose this election, the United States will be Venezuela on steroids. That's what would have happened. Had we lost the election, the 2024 election, we suffered so badly. When you look at the border from 2020, what they did, what Joe Biden administration did to our country should never be forgotten. But if we had to go through another year of that, we would be exactly where Venezuela was in terms. I used to say, if they win, we're going to be Venezuela on steroids. And that's what would have happened.
President, thank you. Are you saying that Secretary Hegseth and Rubio are going to be running Venezuela? And will you be sending in U.S. military
They're
troops
going to
to
be a
provide?
team that's working with the people of Venezuela to make sure that we have Venezuela right. Because for us to just leave, who's going to take over? I mean, there is nobody to take over. You have a vice president who's been appointed by Maduro. And right now she's the vice president and she's, I guess, the president. She was sworn in as president just a little while ago. She had a long conversation with Marco and she said, we'll do whatever you need. I think she was quite gracious, but she really doesn't have a choice. We're going to have this done right. We're not going to just do this with Maduro, then leave like everybody else, leave and say, you know, let it go to hell. If we just left, it has zero chance of ever coming back. We'll run it properly. We'll run it professionally. We'll have the greatest oil companies in the world go in and invest billions and billions of dollars and take out money, use that money in Venezuela. And the biggest beneficiary are going to be the people of Venezuela. And also, I can't stress this strongly enough, the people that got thrown out of Venezuela that are now in the United States, and frankly, some want to stay and some probably want to go back. Yeah.
Well, he's really basking
country, and were any of the detained Americans?
Well, right now they're very protected because nobody's going to mess with us. They're very protected. The people of, and we let them know that you better not touch one of them.
Are you concerned that bad elements of the Maduro regime will remain in place?
Well, we know who they are. We're on them, and they're acting much differently now than they would have acted 2 days ago. Okay, wait, behind you, please.
Mr. President, why is running a country in South America America first?
Well, I think it is because we want to surround ourselves with good neighbors. We want to surround ourselves with stability. We want to surround ourselves with energy. We have tremendous energy in that country. It's very important that we protect it. We need that for ourselves. We need that for the world. And we want to make sure we can protect it. Yes, sir. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, is there a message here for Cuba and Diaz-Canel?
Well, Cuba is an interesting case. Cuba is, not doing very well right now. That system has not been a very good one for Cuba. The people there have suffered for many, many years. And I think Cuba is going to be something we'll end up talking about because Cuba is a failing nation right now, very badly failing nation. And we want to help the people. It's very similar in the sense that we want to help the people in Cuba, but we want to also help the people that were forced out of Cuba and living in this country. Do you want to say something about that, Marco, please?
Well, I mean, I just gave you a statement a few minutes ago about, when the president speaks, you should take him seriously. So suffice it to say, Cuba is a disaster. It's run by incompetent, senile men, and in some cases, not senile, but incompetent nonetheless. It has no economy. It's in total collapse. And by the way, they were, all of the guards that helped protect Maduro, this is well known, their whole spy agency, all that were full of Cubans. I mean, it's amazing. This poor island took over Venezuela in some cases. One of the biggest problems the Venezuelans have is they have to declare independence from Cuba. They tried to basically colonize it from a security standpoint. So, yeah, look, if I lived in Havana and I was in the government, I'd be concerned, at least a little bit.
Oh, statement of intent.
Well, the president already announced a week ago that anything that's sanctioned, it's sanctioned oil, it's not going to be allowed to get there. So that's a pre-existing.
Mr. President.
The answer is yes. Yes.
aware of the location of opposition leader Machado, and have you been in contact with her?
No, we haven't. No, we haven't.
Mr. President,
Do you have any hesitations about Machado?
Mr. President, on Monday.
Oh, I think it would be very tough for her to be the leader. She doesn't have the support within or the respect within the country. She's a very nice woman, but she doesn't have the respect.
Mr. President, is it possible that the U.S. ends up administrating Venezuela for years?
Well, it won't cost us anything because the money coming out of the ground is very substantial. So it's not going to cost us anything. We will. Well, we want safety there. We want to be surrounded by countries that aren't housing all of our enemies all over the world. That's what was happening. And you don't want to have that. But we're going to be rebuilding, and we're not spending money. The oil companies are going to go in. They're going to spend money. We're going to take back the oil that, frankly, we should have taken back a long time ago. A lot of money is coming out of the ground. We're going to get reimbursed for all of that. We're going to get reimbursed for everything that we spend. So it's going to be a very important. This is a very big evening that took place last night. We have to be surrounded by safe, secure countries. And we also have to have energy, very important. We have to have energy that's real energy, not where they're getting 4% and 5% of the energy out of the ground. You take a look, it was such a disaster. So what's going to happen with Venezuela, I think, over the next period of a year is going to be a great thing. And the people of Venezuela will be the biggest beneficiaries.
Mr. President, who's going to send in the U.S. military?
Mr. President, thank you. What did you last speak to Maduro about when you spoke? And is the
Well,
US
I don't want to
at
get
war
into
with
the
Venezuela?
conversations, but I did have conversations with him, and I said, you got to surrender. And I actually thought he was pretty close to doing so, but now he wished he did, yeah.
You said that Maduro is responsible for drug trafficking. You recently pardoned the former president of Honduras who was convicted of many drug trafficking. Can you explain how these two situations are different? And would you ever pardon Maduro?
I endorsed, as you know, the winning president, the man who won in Honduras. I endorsed the man who won in Chile. I endorsed the man who won in Argentina. And we are doing very well with that whole group. What the man that I pardoned was, if you could equate it to us, he was treated like the Biden administration treated a man named Trump. That didn't work out too well for them. This was a man who was persecuted very unfairly. He was the head of the country. He was persecuted very unfairly. And there are a number of them. And we felt that it was a very unfair situation that happened to him. He's also a party member of the man who won. So obviously the people liked what I did. And one of the reasons that was done is because of the fact that the party in power felt very strongly that that man was treated very badly. I studied it very quickly, and then I studied it in great detail. I went to a lot of the people standing behind me, and they felt that that man was persecuted and treated very badly. That's why I gave him a pardon.
You referenced boots on the ground earlier. Can you just sort of button this up? Do you envision the U.S. military having a presence in Venezuela as the U.S. runs that country?
No, we're going to have a presence in Venezuela as it pertains to oil, because we have to have, we're sending our expertise in. So you may need something, not very much. But no, we're going to be taking out a tremendous amount of wealth out of the ground. And that wealth is going to the people of Venezuela and people from outside of Venezuela that used to be in Venezuela. And it goes also to the United States of America in the form of reimbursement for the damages caused us by that country. So I want to thank you all very much. Thank you. Do you have one? Yes, please. You were so nice before. I'm going to give you the final question. Go
Thank
ahead.
you, Mr.
Unless it's a
President.
bad question, in
It's
which
about
case I'll
Putin.
go one word. It's about who?
It's about Putin, if you want.
About Putin. Well, that's
Okay.
always nice
You had
to
a
talk
phone-
about Putin.
You had a phone call with him
Yeah.
on Monday. Did he talk at all about Maduro? Did y'all talk about this?
No, we didn't.
And
We
then-
never spoke about Maduro.
Are you mad at him right now? I mean, there's this
I'm not
intelligence.
thrilled with
Mad at
Putin.
him? What is
I'm
this?
not
Fucking
thrilled with
spooky.
Putin. He's killing too many people.
Was that
I
intelligence?
thought that would be so.
Mad at him. Like,
I
what
settled
is this?
8
Like a
and
sort
one
of
quarter
rom-com
war. You know what the
teen
1 quarter
drama?
was? Thailand and Cambodia. I did it again. They broke out, and I did it in about 5 hours, and I settled it. I'm giving myself 1 quarter, so I'm up to now 8 and 1 quarter. In other words, I settled the war, but then they broke out. They had a pretty bad breakout over the last 4 days. I got them to go back to peace. So I only give 1 quarter. I thought the easiest one would be, one of the easier ones would be Russia, Ukraine. It's not. And they both have done some pretty bad things. And look, that's Biden's war. That's not my war. But I want to stop the lives. Did you see where last month, 30,000, it was 27,000 the month before. 30,000, mostly soldiers, were killed this last month. 30,000. I want to stop that. You know, I got NATO to pay 5% instead of the 2% that they weren't paying. They weren't paying 2, now they pay 5. And we send them a lot of munitions. We send them a lot of things, missiles and various other things, a lot. And they pay. The United States is not losing money. We're probably making money on that. It's the last thing I care about. I just want to stop all those people. We're losing 25, 30,000 human beings that come from 2 places that are very far away. But if I can stop, because it's something I've been pretty good at doing, deals, I guess. It's all a deal. Life is a big deal. But if I can stop that war and stop 30,000 young people, in addition to the fact that people are being killed in Kiev, people are being killed in other cities throughout, a much smaller number, but they're being killed, viciously killed. So I'm not happy about it. I thought that would be something that would get solved. We have Mr. Witkoff here. I think that we're making progress, but that's a war that should have never happened. If I were president, it would have never happened. Putin says it. Everybody says it. If I were president, that would have never happened. But I inherited that war. That was Joe Biden, Zelensky, and Putin. I came into the situation, and it's a mess. And I will say this. I watched an operation last night that was so precise, that was so brilliant. I mean, it was incredible. If we had our people, like this general and our people involved, that war would not have gone on very long, that I can tell you. That war, to use an old term, that war has become a bloodbath, and we want it to get stopped. Thank you very much.
So Donald Trump just leaving that rather extraordinary press briefing. Okay. We were expecting perhaps some technical details about the status of the operation, about how the operation unfolded, but no doubt the headline coming out
the analyst
saying, Donald Trump saying, we're going to run the country until such a time as we can do a safe, proper and judicious transition. So the US is now going to run Venezuela. Also made comments about oil and US oil companies going in to run the oil operations in Venezuela. So much to pick.
Okay. I'm going to put that, I'm going to keep that on just in case they cut to something noteworthy. Oh, okay. So welcome to the stream, everybody. What time is it? 12:38. So 1 hour, 40 minutes in, we can finally get started. Firstly, apologies for being late. I was actually on my way home from having some drinks or whatever, seeing some friends here at 1:30, at about 1:15, 1:30 Eastern Standard Time, so 6:30 UK time. And I was, as you healthily do, looking on the internet, looking on X, and there was a space. Before I joined YouTube as much as I did, I was much more active on X Spaces. Those of you watching on X may be aware of that. But I'm also streaming this to Substack, guys. So if you do want to join me on any of those platforms, well, just type my name in as you see on screen and you'll find me. But anyway, there was an old community of military analysts, OSINT types or open source intelligence types that I saw. I used to do a lot more with when I lived in the US in Washington. And since I moved back to the UK or European time, I haven't, and just because the timing is impossible. But anyway, what I thought were sort of rumblings, maybe there were things, quickly it became apparent in the run up to about 2 a.m. that something was amiss, something was afoot. And then we had this fallout. Now, I'm not going to go over too much of what happened yesterday. I think it's pretty clear. Based on the comments provided by the military representative, I don't know his name, the address, right, the public address. But the point is right now that what we have seen in the past 12 hours? I don't know. It's 2 a.m. Yeah, 10 hours is extraordinary for both sort of like, good or whatever for I don't know. I'm hesitant to use the word positive or negative here because, well, I'll come to that in a second. But basically, what we've seen is just it's going to be looked at for many years to come. That image of Maduro on his, I'll bring it up, of him being captured is just insane. I don't know if you guys have seen the photo of him yet, but let me show you here. Actually, that is a bit like the photos in 24 with Trump, being attempted assassination or the fist or whatever. This is a photo that's going to be referenced for a long time to come in international relations, foreign policy, history, whatever. Because what the US has done is incredibly it rewrites a lot of things that a lot of us are used to. But yeah, so the whole operation took 90 minutes, less than 90 minutes from the moment that the first strike's being recorded and uploaded to social media to, as Trump says, 3:20, whatever it was, 7, Maduro is captured. I made a tweet that largely sums it up, and people seem to agree with it, which is that simply, regardless of what you think, whether you support the US military actions, there is no other country, and every other member of the Trump administration reiterated this same point, no other country could undertake such an operation. Now, I've already made these comments on the internet, on I don't know, on Spaces, or whatever. And what's irritating is, of course, that people will be very binary in their interpretation of what I'm saying. I don't know how I feel about this right now, because I haven't had enough time to, like all of us, assess it, to reflect on it. And that's largely what I was going to talk about for now, which is the sort of the normative arguments. About 3 days ago, I made a video which I posted on the channel of my main message for last year. And it was this: my biggest takeaway, it's not working, come on, my internet Mexican. I am in Mexico, by the way, guys, for some of you wondering. I'm in Mexico because I came here for some time off in the better weather. I enjoy diving, I enjoy time in the sun. But obviously that means I have spotty Wi-Fi. But anyway, the video I wanted to show you was this one, which is my biggest takeaway. And that's basically what I'm going to sort of summarize now. Find it. Yes, that's what we need in life, more AI. Anyway, so I'm not the best at these live streaming split window things. No, but the essence of what I want to say is this. And if you guys do want to ask me questions, do drop them in the comments. But if you make it a super chat, then it does automatically get highlighted so that I see it. No pressure, of course. But anyway, what Trump's administration have done is firmly 100% made it that we can no longer in the West, or at least in America, preach about values, about rule of law, about democratic and use of soft power, because Trump has rejected all of that. Again, what I am clear on in terms of my positions on a couple of things is I hate the Maduro government. I've always hated Maduro. I have a lot of Venezuelan friends, a lot of Venezuelan colleagues, and there are tons and tons of people, the reality, like in Iran, who actively strongly reject the governing body, regime, government, whatever you want to call it, the authorities. That is unquestionable. However, the way that this has been done is, well, and people will argue that because Venezuela is a national security threat for the United States, because it props up governments like Russia, China, Iran, whatever is a safe haven for dissident types, anti-Western voices. It justifies the means or the actions done. Now, I don't know if the end means do justify the means, because the way that Trump has done this now, and I'm sure some of you have seen this and where I'm going, but what precedent does this set for other countries? What precedent does it set for the Chinese over Taiwan? What precedent does it set for Russia over parts of Ukraine or other parts of Europe? I mean, I don't think Russia could ever pull off an operation like this, certainly not, but that's the point. As you've heard me say a million times before, and Trump even mentioned it, the Monroe Doctrine, but this is a reflection of the way that Trump views the world. You have your spheres of influence. Latin America is America's, Europe is Russia's, at least in theory. Asia is China's. India and South Asia, we could discuss. Middle East, Africa, it's a little bit less clear cut. But yeah, that is my main concern. And I think a very legitimate criticism by those who actively disdain not just the Trump administration, but the West. Part of the reason why the West has its reputation as it does, and a lot of issues that we have, is because the West has never adhered to the values and principles that it has preached. And whilst I firmly obviously support, well, I am Western, that's what I said in the video, in the video that I shared with you here, although I forgot to share my screen. This one, because we need to stop kidding ourselves. I'm even wearing the lovely same shirt. We need to stop kidding ourselves that the West, or America at least, is any different. And Europe is, and this is where the responses from Europe have been problematic again, because Europe said that they welcome the end of they were quite particular with the words, but we welcome the end of the Maduro regime, or the freedom of the Venezuelan people, I think is how Kajis said it, right? But then the second point that they write underneath, we ensure, or we urge that this adheres to the principles of the UN Charter. Guys, it's the UN, and I hate to say that, but it's irrelevant now. Values do not have any basis in Trump's foreign policy doctrine. There is no basis for values, for principles. Unfortunately, I'm saying this not because I like it, but because it's an uncomfortable truth that we have to deal with now. Europe is, trying to basically balance this sort of thing of saying we welcome the intervention from the Trump administration, but we also think it should be done under the guise of international law. Well, it can't be done under the guise of international law. It makes absolutely no sense. I'm trying to bring up the statement by Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the EU, or EU Commission. Let me see here. Yeah. So let me change the tab. So, following very closely the situation in Venezuela, we stand by the people of Venezuela and support a peaceful and democratic transition, right? So particular wording. They support the people of Venezuela, but they don't, tacitly, this isn't a support of the Trump approach. Any solution must respect international law and the UN Charter. Well, Ursula, it's out the window. It's gone. It's completely irrelevant now, the UN Charter, because the Trump administration, the arbiter of it, the biggest supporter, the donor, the biggest patron of the UN's budget, and et cetera, gone. So the EU is going to, in this context at least, frustratingly, do what it always does. Strongly worded statements. We observe, we monitor, we urge and encourage, we respect, all the key buzzwords, but not actually going to do anything. in the sense of criticizing the Trump administration, which you could arguably say is necessary in this regard. Again, I'm not saying whether I do or don't agree with this. The schoolboy in me, who studied military studies in his, degree, whoa, that was cool. But what is the fallout from this? What are the consequences for this? The Trump administration have gone in, and now we have, in international relations theory, as some of you know, I like to try and bring in a little bit of the academic thinking here, just so, because we can say a bunch of stuff, but I think it's interesting to apply it to how the correct terminology. And in this case, I'm sure some of you know what a vassal state is, a client state. This is a satellite state in its purest form, because on paper, Venezuela is everything independent. But you have literally the foreign secretary of state and the defense secretary literally micromanaging the economy and all the relevant industries on behalf of the government, on behalf of the Venezuelan people. So it's not really a vassal state. It's more specific than that. And it's not really a client state, because it's not only about providing oil to America. It's about literally running the Venezuelan state as an extension of the US economy to provide oil at preferred rates to whoever it is, including, as we heard Trump basically agree, China. Whoever's willing to buy. And of course, therefore, this doesn't stop at Venezuela. He's hinted at Cuba. Now, I've been working on a video which in some ways is kind of fucking irrelevant now, excuse me, because that's sort of a half a day's work of video editing and production gone, which was basically how the operations in Venezuela were impacting Cuba. 15% of Cuba's economy has gone based on the oil embargo or restrictions the Trump administration imposed on Venezuela in the past few months. And now you've got an insinuation from Trump and Rubio that Cuba is next. I mean, I don't think anything is going to happen overnight, but certainly it's in the spotlight. It's in their headlights, whatever the expression is, right? So I'm still half asleep. Well, not half asleep, but I'm got like 3 hours sleep last night, guys. So I'm not going to be as coherent as I would normally. I'm also not a live streamer as best. I'm too English. I get a little bit too sort of like polite and but no, yeah. No, but just some of the things we saw yesterday, some of the footage. This I know was also meant to be a Iran space. But that leads me to another interesting point, which is that Trump said that they were locked and loaded, ready to go. Maybe it wasn't about Iran. I mean, I am going out on a whim here by saying, is it too much of is it too far-fetched to suggest that the Trump administration were playing a bit of a red herring with Iran? But also because, although I've always slightly been skeptical of this, some of you who follow me because of my Iranian coverage or what I've done in the Middle East in the past, Hezbollah have actually had quite a strong presence in Venezuela. And Iran and IRGC factions have been quite active on the ground, a lot like the Russians have been with Wagner in the previous few years, especially after the 2018 election in Venezuela. And so some people, I saw one interesting post or comment on X earlier today, basically saying, did the Trump administration deliberately take out Venezuela leadership so that the Iranian regime, the Islamic Republic, doesn't have anywhere to go or has less options of support when the Americans, Israelis, whatever it's going to be, if it is, go after them? Now, it's an interesting thought, but I think the Iranians would simply flee to Russia. I don't think Venezuela makes any sense at all. It's just too far, but also why? Can you really see Khamenei on the beach in that? Like, what the fuck? Anyway, excuse me. But that also leads me to another point that I just reminded myself of, which is that, regime change is thrown around a lot now, especially by anti-Western, the Glenn Dizens, the Jackson Hinkles, the types on the platforms who are heavily against what they see as modern Western imperialism. But this isn't regime change. This is leadership change, not something I had considered. And then I heard someone say it last night in a space that I was running. And I think it's incredibly articulate, because this is a regime change, means the eradication or removal of the entire system, of the entire group of people who are relevant to the power, the governing. Leadership change indicates a much more narrowly focused, targeted shift. And that's what we've seen, because the defense minister, the interior minister, the vice president of Venezuela, they're all there. And they've all said very bluntly, well, apart from the VP, I think she said she's willing to work with them. I don't know what to say at face value from the Trump administration sometimes. But the defense and interior ministers have made it very clear their sentiments about what's happened. So what this means now is a bit of a power vacuum. Trump says he's going to go in there and that they're going to work with the remaining incumbents. Well, how do we know that that's going to go well down with other people? There are different factions within every government. We've got it in the Labour Party in the UK, for goodness sake, right? The Corbynites versus the Blairites. We've got it in the Conservative Party, the One Nation Tories versus the more sort of hardline conservatives. My point is that there are going to be parts of the Maduro government that are not okay with the US just coming in and administering the entire thing, which leads to instability. It leads to power vacuums or tension. And of course, I mean, his comments around Maria Machado, that's interesting. Many people thought she was, absolutely the one to take over. Is there a little personal spite there because of the peace prize? Seems pretty blunt to me. But I'm just going to take this off now, I think. But what? So Edmundo Gonzalez, right? The guy who was supposed to have won last year. So what? He doesn't have any role to play, even though the actual Venezuelan people, a large proportion, I'm not pretending to know how many people, did vote for him. So sort of Trump is, yes, giving the Venezuelan people the command and control back, but he also isn't, because they're going to work with the incumbent leadership. Doesn't really make sense. The other thing is, of course, that this is the big question around this is the legality. It's kind of what I said before about the precedents, but more specifically on the legality of this. The Trump administration are basically trying to say that this was a lawfully done operation because it was done under law enforcement. It was done through non-military means, or it wasn't utilizing military means, and therefore war didn't have to be declared. It didn't have to seek congressional approving or even notify them, which I think is quite scary, because Trump, he went off, as he usually does after Rubio's comments, basically saying that, well, Congress are just slightly irritating. They would have leaked. What, is he seriously undermining the actual democratic institutions of the United States, the checks and balances that the founding fathers actually introduced to ensure that POTUS isn't overly powerful? I mean, that shouldn't come as any surprise, but anyway, the point is that by designating this as a terrorist organization, which he did, being very specific with the designation, the classification, it basically means that what the US has done is completely fine. It's legal. I mean, not really. Anyone in their right mind would say that this is not, because you've got Delta Force, you've got the Marines, you've got the Navy, you've got the Air Force, okay, and the CIA there. Apparently there was a CIA informant on the inside who helped give whereabouts of Maduro and his wife. So this is anything but just a sort of law enforcement system or whatever, operation, excuse me. I don't really know. I'm not an expert on US domestic law or whatever extraterritorial law in that regard. So there's only so much I can say, but just my obviously intuitive reaction, my gut reaction is it's I need to put the sorry guys, I should put the comments on stage. Is not well, it's questionable at best and completely BS at worst. So, you know, but people who are heavily pro-Trump are going to be like, or just heavily pro whatever American power, are going to be like, oh well, whatever, we can do what we like with the US. Yeah, you can, but doesn't bode well for future principles and just restoration of any reputation that the US might want to have in a post-Trump world. So we are firmly back in hard power. We're firmly back in might is right. Not that we didn't know that already, but I also found it quite harrowing, actually, very, very scary, when Trump basically said anyone, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically insinuated that anyone who gets in the way of America in what they want to do, you know, they will face the wrath of the US military. So what, Europe again? Like, no, it was actually like, and some of you put it in the comments, Greenland, Panama, Canada. Like, does this mean that we could actually see something happen? I haven't seen any comments, Matt. No, nothing from the King of Denmark. I don't think people are firstly focused on Denmark, but that's my point. What is the snowball effect from this in so many different ways? Zuki, how does this? Oh yeah, guys, as I say, drop it if you want me to answer your questions. I mean, there's been like 500 comments or something. I have no idea. Like, put a super chat or whatever it's called. Like, if you want them to be, so I can see them. But for the questions that I do think, excuse me. Let me see here. How does this compare to? Yeah, I'm going to take a moment to sort of pause because I've been talking for what, like 25 minutes suddenly straight. Cool, I can out-talk Trump. How does this compare to Panama? I'm not an expert of Panama. There's a really good history series that I've been listening to, The Real Dictators, on Apple Podcasts. Goes through the lives. I learned so much about Vendela, about Pinochet, about the current one I'm listening to is the former autocrat of the Central African Republic, but also about Albania. Lots of interesting things. The reason I'm mentioning this is because that makes me think of what happened in Panama in 1989. I think the difference is that the operations in Panama were a full-fledged military operation. This was Operation Absolute Resolute, was it? Absolute Resolute? Doesn't roll off the tongue, bit of a tongue twister. Say that, Absolute Resolute, Absolute Resolute, Absolute. Okay, that's not that bad. That was a much more comprehensive military operation. This was a bit of a distract, diversion, and like raid, really. They had a lot of quick strikes on critical infrastructure, right? If we take a step back for a minute, there were 7 sites struck, all primarily linked to military or critical infrastructure, ports, a couple of airports, military installations, but also things that would go kaboom with a lot of fire, right? Clear intention to distract, to disorientate the Venezuelan forces from knowing where to focus. And then under all of that, they sent in their elite units to capture Maduro. As I say, the whole thing lasted 90 minutes. This is not like Panama. Panama was several months operation, which saw fatalities, you saw casualties. It's completely different, but also the broader geopolitical context is very different. At that point, there wasn't as much question over US hypocrisy because of Iraq and Afghanistan not having happened. US primacy, or as the hegemon, was very much apparent at that point. The Soviet Union was Berlin Wall was undergoing, the whole Soviet Union dissolution were undergoing. So the geopolitical context are very different, and if anything, Panama was sort of seen as a bit of a militarily, it wasn't seen as the best, but people sort of normatively, ideologically were like, oh, well, America's going in there to liberate. This is good. We support this. And then obviously came the Gulf War. But it's very different. And I wouldn't, if anything, I think what this demonstrates, this operation in the past 12 hours, is just how refined the US military is. As I say, and I'm saying this cold-heartedly right now, there is no this is not supportive or rejecting. It's just on the face of it, it was incredibly impressive. Just the overwhelming show of force, but not just the overwhelming show of force, the efficiency, the rate of deployment. I mean, I'm not a pure military analyst. I haven't served, but just you have to admire the speed and efficiency of what the US did like this, and so covertly as well, to distract so many people, to completely catch the Venezuelan military, which is not, the Venezuelan military is not, it's not Guyana's, which is a couple thousand people. It's still, Venezuela is a big country. The topography, the people, it's you still have to consider it. It's not an easy thing to undertake. So yeah, that's pretty nuts. But Panama is very different. That was a bit of a long roundabout way of answering your question. Sorry about that. Global Gambit. We are already in World War III. Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. I believe now that values are, there have never been values, there are only interests. Now, personally, I like to believe in the principle that there are certain democratic values that we should still try to adhere, but there is absolutely no dancing around the fact that Western countries, or especially the United States, cannot preach this anymore. We cannot go into the US, the UN Security Council, and talk about the rule of law and the upholding of certain institutional frameworks if we are threatening to pull out of the WHO. We're threatening to, that's a bad thing. How do you turn that off? I've never understood that about StreamYard. When you're willing to, I'm going to do it this way, pull out of the WHO, defund the UN, defund NATO. That's not based on the principles that you preach. So no, I agree with you, but I agree with you to an extent. But we're not in World War III, mate. This is dumb. Like, World War III is categorically known as involving nuclear warfare. We're not in World War III. I mean, Alex Jones says we're in fucking World War III every 20 minutes, and that guy's I don't know. He's not even worth talking about. There are, what I like about grifters, or people who are anti Western, or people like the Jackson here, you've got ones who are actually quite educated. They're just disenfranchised with the system because they feel hard done by it. And then you've just got the morons, the real morons, like the Jackson Hinkles or the Alex Joneses, the ones that are they're just so retarded. It's just like, what? Anyway, let's get to some more comments. What do I think of Cuba? Well, Ahmed, thanks for your comment, mate. I don't think anything's going to happen in Cuba right now. As I said, I've been working on a video, which I will probably post tomorrow at this rate. But basically, Cuba's economy has been in dire straits for many years, but especially in the past year since Trump re-entered office and their operations around Venezuela took off. I think that I don't think there'll be an operation against Cuba right away. I mean, I don't know. It's difficult to say whether the Trump administration would even undertake some kind of military operation against Cuba. In my opinion, I think that they would probably seek to take a pause on that. While the efficiency of this operation has been illustrated, it doesn't mean you want to overdo how much you use military intervention to get what you want. Although this is Trump, he may well just think, hang it, let's just go in there regardless. But I don't think anything's going to happen on a US military front over Cuba. What I do think is going to happen, though, is that the economy is going to get incredibly worse, even more. As I said, it's the economy as a whole has contracted by 15% in over a year, I think it was, just around a year. Don't hold me on that. There's a Wall Street Journal article which you can look up, which talks about it. But yeah, basically, I think that the Trump administration will, as they administer Venezuela, try to squeeze Cuba economically as much as they can before they resort to any kind of kinetic military force. But over what time horizon, I also think is quite noteworthy. I think you'll see a lull for the next quarter, the next couple of months, whilst Trump turns his attention maybe back to the Iranian situation, back to Ukraine, obviously. Oh, and on that, can I just make a point of contention? Let me see here. What did he say? Oh, so I wrote down a hell of a load of notes in my notebook. Ah, yes, the journalist. You seem mad at him. What is this? A teenage sitcom? Like the journalist asking Donald Trump, you're mad at, you seem mad at Putin. Are you mad at him? What kind of way is that to talk about warmongering despot? Like, I don't know what paper or magazine she was from, but Jesus Christ, is that the state of certain journalists in the US? No offense, guys, but like, I don't know. Ask the question a bit better. I know Trump was sort of joking around at the end, banter, etc., but sort of, are you mad at him? Makes it sound like they're, well, love, teen romance, right? You know, my boyfriend's ghosted me for a week. Oh, you mad at him? I just thought it was incredibly unprofessional and frankly pretty tone deaf. But yeah, let's move on from that. Looking through some of the comments here. Yeah, I mean, again, on the Trump Greenland thing, I think Panama largely sort of, I don't know. I don't think Panama's as much of a focus as Greenland. Trump hasn't mentioned it since this time last year, but he has mentioned Greenland more. So based on that, I would think that Greenland is more of a priority. Obviously, what would happen? Let's be very blunt about this. What would happen if the US conducted some kind of military operation, show of force against Greenland? Well, nothing. The Danish are not going to do anything. And I just don't think the European, what are the European Union going to do? What, the Brits and the French are somehow going to get involved in that? The Germans, the Danish, the Norwegians? Nothing's going to happen. But I just cannot imagine I find it so hard to believe a scenario where the US is literally launching military force action against Venezuela is one thing. Iran is another. A NATO ally? And it's not because Trump cares about NATO, but because that is such a, I think that all of, Lindsey Graham's and others that, question Trump's America first, isolationist approach, etc. I think even they would be like, this is nuts. This guy needs to be like, I think you'd see an attempt to sort of impeach him or sort of really restrain his power. I cannot see the Trump administration doing something over Greenland. Also because the Greenland people don't want it. They want eventually a referendum on their independence. I'm not pretending to know what's inside Trump's mind, but yeah, I just don't know. And as for Canada, no. No. I like Mark Carney. I'm going to be honest with you. I think he's not in everything, don't get me wrong, but I think he's done a pretty good job of navigating Trump in his first, well, not even year. And I I just don't think so. I cannot see a world where he does anything against Canada. Greenland less sure, but Canada certainly not. But again, let's see what other comments we've got here. Yeah, that was the name of the operation, Hatax, Absolute Resolve. That was the name of the that was the absolute resolve of the Trump administration. And I think that's another point, actually, just to expand on it for a second, that, you know, Trump had his colloquial ways or sort of chatty ways about referencing Putin or Xi Jinping he has respect for. Erdogan, not so sure. Netanyahu, not so sure. But what I think is interesting is that, you know, he has a degree of respect for certain types of strongmen. Not Nicolas Maduro, even though Maduro is very similar in the type of governance, the type of system that he runs and manages in Venezuela. He absolutely hated the guy. And it's just, it's very, it exposes a lot, excuse me. It exposes a lot Trump's hypocrisy or inconsistencies about that. I don't like any of those people, just to be clear. But, you know, Trump has respect for them. So it's very much how he picks up and chooses. Obviously, Venezuela is slightly different because it's in America's quote unquote backyard or sphere of influence. And so America's national security self-interests supersedes his respect or sort of enjoyment of strongmen type characters. So, okay, of course. So many of you want to know what I think about the Russian perspective on this. So I've got like a remnants of a sore throat, I think. Now, again, I'm caveating everything in that I don't know how I feel about what the US has done. But when it comes to Putin, this is hilarious. The Russian government have obviously condemned what America has done. That's it. That's all they're going to do. Like the pro-Putinist commentators will often talk about a strongly worded statement from the West or the British writing and say, well, that's what Putin has basically done. He's been very British today and released a strongly worded statement. Nothing. The Russians have no capacity to do anything at all. Not that they would have done anyway if they could. Geography just means that they cannot. And as I've covered in previous live streams or conversations, Russia is completely overstretched. The economy is in dire straits. Doesn't mean it's on its imminent collapse. No, we talk about that every other week or every month with Konstantin Samelyov. But the point is that Russia does not have the bandwidth to operate across multiple theaters anymore. And even when it did, that was in a much more limited capacity to what the Americans can do. Russia didn't come to the aid of Syria, a country that it has held a much stronger and physically deeper reliance or relationship with in 2024. So they're certainly not going to do anything over Venezuela. What's interesting is where Iran falls into that. Now, as some of you joined or wanted me to do, was about Iran, which I will come to a little bit later. But a lot of speculation is obviously, would the Russians come to the aid of Iran? Again, I find it incredibly unlikely because the Russian military is so focused, the war machine is so not even focused, it's completely committed physically in operations and just physical production to the war in Ukraine. So are you going to risk, are you going to spare and deviate or reallocate, assets for another country, a country that you have, benefits from a strategic partnership sense, but are you going to commit to uphold a regime which in itself can't sustain its own survivability? You're not. So I'm very skeptical Russia would do anything over Iran, and certainly not over Venezuela. And to your more broader question about Baltics or Georgia, again, I think that depends heavily on how things go over the few months in Ukraine. As I made in another video on the channel, the Estonian chief of intelligence, I believe, said that he does not believe that Russia actually wants to engage NATO. And that comes from the country that has, I think, a quarter of the population is ethnic Russian or ethnic speaking Russian, and right on the borders, and therefore fully knows the the threat or risks posed by Putin's government. So if they're saying that, I find it unlikely that the Russians are going to use some form of kinetic military action. And that's the thing. You have to understand that people, when they hear military action, they always assume typical ground invasions like Iraq or Afghanistan. Those days are over. I'm not saying that they're still not possible, but the likelihood that you're going to see the Americans launching some large assault, amphibious assault, ground invasion of Venezuela, non-existent. That's why they did what they did. That's why the military representative speaker during the discussion was saying very clearly they practiced this weeks, every time, debriefing thoroughly, because they didn't want a long drawn out operation. They wanted in, out, gone, done. And that's what they did. And so in this regard, Russia's not going to do that. It's not going to go in on the ground and forcibly occupy, physically annex or occupy Georgia or the Baltics. Certainly not the Baltics. Moldova is the biggest question for me, because if in a scenario where the Russians are able to push through Kherson down to Odessa and then link up with Transnistria, the tiny sliver of land, well, I can bring up some maps here actually if you want. Let me bring up a map here. Yeah, let's do this one. So basically, ever since Putin, I'm going to step back a second and just go on a slight tangent about the war in Ukraine for a second. Ever since the, how do you work this? How do I work that? Oh, right, okay. I'm good at this. I know what I'm doing. There we go. All right. So ever since basically the war in Ukraine fully occurred, or whatever, full-scale invasion, a lot of speculation has been about what Putin actually wanted. And aside from turning Belarus into Ukraine into another Belarus, as in a buffer state, another client state, an extension, basically puppet state of Russia, once it became apparent that the initial 3-day operation was going well, I think after the peace discussions also fell through, I think Putin or whoever those that be reorientated towards this. This is Novorossiya. Now, those of you who follow the Russian things more often will probably recognize this, but this is basically what I think Russia is after. Because if you look at an ethnic map of Ukraine, the further east you go, the more ethnic speaking Russians or more influence of Russia historically exists. Now, a lot of this land was conquered by Katerina the Great, as otherwise known in Russia, during her time as Tsar or Tsarist or whatever the female name is. And therefore this went all the way along to Moldova. And then around here you have Transnistria. It's that tiny sliver of land. So for me, this makes the most sense for a few reasons. One, historically, as I've just alluded to. Second, linguistically, it plays very much into that argument by the Kremlin of the Russian protection of ethnic Russians, the protection of the Russian-speaking state. Thirdly, though, economics. This part of Ukraine, I mean, before it was bombed to hell, it's still very minerally rich. and with this idea of the peace deal between Zelensky and of this free economic zone, right? Russia would control a very resource-rich area, including flat lands, which would make it basically a monopoly over things like grain production and things. But also because of supposed energy fields. I forget exactly whether it's gas or oil down here, but there was one assessment done by a private corporation, I think in 2012, which argued or speculated that there might be a lot of energy deposits down here, just off the west of Crimea. So Russia could access that and control it. But then, of course, finally, the other thing is strategic. Strategically, if Russia takes all this, it unquestionably is the controller of the Black Sea. And therefore, sphere of influence is heightened. Putin can command things over Turkey. Well, maybe a bit, but you get the point. But also, because it cuts off Ukraine completely. It cuts off Ukraine completely from a critical economic thoroughfare access point, and therefore turns Ukraine into what's known as a rump state, a country sort of like Bulgaria in the aftermath of the world wars, when Bulgaria got a lot of land after the Nazis, or aligned with the Nazis, and then at the end they saw a huge reduction. The same as Hungary as well. So both those countries became effective rump states, and so Ukraine becomes an effective rump state. Now, more hardline pro-Putinists argue that obviously with all this happening, Belarus will take this part of Ukraine, Poland will take this section, Hungary will take this, and Romania will take all this. That's bollocks. That's not happening. But certainly, I think that this is what Putin is after, in a physical, as a physical, visual sense. I can show for you here. Novorossiya literally means New Russia, as it shows on the top. But right now, as we say, Luhansk, Donetsk are largely fully controlled by Russia at this point. Zaporizhia, Kherson are 75% controlled, but that's not enough to command the situation. And so it's around these areas, particularly Dnipro and Kharkiv, where the Russians still have those interests in certain things, that is the sticking point over the peace negotiations. But anyway, so that's Ukraine. So to bring it back to the very original question, I don't think he has the physical capacity in Russia to undertake all of this, but also somehow engage in Moldova, unless he succeeds through this scenario, which again is very, very far-fetched at the moment. Kazakhstan is complicated. They have a sort of constructive relationship with the Russian government. Tokayev, who is who inherited the leadership from Nazarbayev, he was very critical of the Russians when they undertook in 2021. It's 2022. Excuse me. When we thought that was going to be one of the critical geopolitical events of that year, about 6 weeks before the invasion by Putin, he sent some forces into Kazakhstan to quell uprisings under the CSTO, or Collective Security Treaty Organization. So there is tension there still. Russia sort of lords over the Central Asian states, but China is very firmly in there now, and Turkey's growing in its interests, again, because Russia doesn't have the capacity to control all of its spheres of influences. And so other countries are moving in to shift that balance of power. And on China to Taiwan, as I said at the beginning, this is a very dangerous precedent for what it sets on China's actions over Taiwan. Physically speaking, I don't think China's going to move on Taiwan for a while. The conditions have to be perfect. There's only really 2 months that make it physically possible for a maritime invasion, which is obviously what it would be. That's April and October, because otherwise the seas are pretty unfavorable. And while the Chinese have been developing some pretty novel, innovative systems, I still think that, we heard from the US team about they were preparing for months and months, and then suddenly last night they were like, oh, the conditions are perfect, let's go. So it is very much a sort of, you can plan for ages and then suddenly in the click of a moment you go in. So I don't think China's ready yet, and it's also impossible to tell what she is thinking. In the context of Trump. The Chinese think very differently, and I am constantly frustrated by a lot of Westerners or people who underestimate China. That's not an endorsement. I don't like the CCP, but most people, I just saw a comment about 2027. Yeah, that's when some people reckon it could happen, because also Xi is running out in terms of his time. And also because there comes a moment where I think they say that peak military efficiency will be reached by the Chinese, basically in the sense that the military of the PLA, certain military assets will be outdated or will be required to be updated. So in my opinion, I think the window is definitely in the latter half of this decade. But yeah, one expert I've had on a few times, who you might have heard, Dmitry Operovich, he's mentioned 27, and I think Michael Kaufman, another military analyst who I respect, has said something similar. So, yeah, I'm not going away today thinking that the Chinese are going to bed tonight, sort of reevaluating their entire grand strategy based on Trump's operations in Venezuela. But clearly, obviously, this was also show of intent by the Trump administration to any and all countries. I mean, Trump said it so himself, but like, as I say, no country, not even the Chinese, could do what the US just did. They just don't, the Chinese don't have that military efficiency. They're very big, but as far as I could tell, the special forces are just not yet at that level. And the intelligence, I'm still learning about Chinese intelligence quality. It's expanded a lot in recent years, but I was having an interesting chat with a gentleman called Malcolm Nance. Some of you may know him, and he mentioned that the Chinese intelligence is basically on par with the Russians now, and marginally not much different from the US. But that's something I would say. Sorry, but 2 months opening to take Taiwan isn't the ferries. Yeah, it's the ferries that I was thinking of. I can try and find something about that in a second. Do you think what Trump did in Venezuela was to send a message? Yes, I do. I definitely think that this is all part of a broader strategy. And actually, that brings me to something I wrote down in this lovely notebook. Oh, actually, fun fact, guys. I've been working on some merch. Because some of you like my jokes with two liberals and a Marxist. Some of you like my jokes about concept of a plan. We had the pigeon joke with Constantine. So we've got some merch come in. So yeah, maybe I don't know, maybe a notebook. What do you think? I'm thinking mug, classic mug, maybe a coaster. But I think notebooks are quite fun. Maybe a pen. I don't know. Anyway, I'm playing around with it. I'm having some fun with it, seeing what we can come up with. But something that I wrote in this lovely journal, Christmas present from my family, was simply that the US is resorting to efforts of hard power to forcibly reshape the international system to be more favorable to America's interests again. Now, that might sound like a little bit of a sort of obvious statement, but in the sense that the Biden administration and other administrations have been a lot more just wanting to resort to economic sanctions, never to really, if this is the spectrum between all-out diplomacy and peace engagement and all-out war, they tend to stay in the middle in economic sanctions. Trump is shifting that dial a little bit more over here, demonstrating that the US is, again, willing to undertake, in some contexts, limited and others slightly more military engagement, as we saw with the Operation Rising Lion and now Operation Absolute Resolute. And that, I do think, shifts the goalposts, because you're seeing a removal of Syria. You are seeing a dismantling of Iran and its proxies. You've now seen the removal of a despot or whatever, strongman in Venezuela. Are you going to see the same in Cuba? Is this just the US? Is this the Trump administration basically being like, well, we've had enough of talking about wanting to see the change. We're just going to make it happen now. So I definitely think that that is something to bear in mind in the context of all of this. Absolutely resolute, not absolute resolute. Okay. Sorry. I don't know. I think it's a bit of a daft name, to be honest with you. Let's go through some of these comments. Now, again, some of you watching, I've already seen some comments about me in World Bank, and it's like, guys, just because I worked at an institution doesn't mean that I represent the institution. It doesn't mean that I agree with everything about that institution. Okay? I am more of a subject or whatever product of the West, but I am very cognizant of the double standards, and I've actually been working on in the past few days trying to refine how I what is my actual mission here with the channel, or what am I trying to do here, right? There are some people who are on YouTube and they are Iranian, and they are working on dispelling the disinformation around the mullahs, around the regime, and helping to liberate Iran, but also educate Westerners on the concerns around Islamic extremism or something, right? That's their sort of mission statement. For me, I think it's more sort of like, I believe in the West or Western institutions or democracy, but I don't think we can kid ourselves anymore that they can be based on what we thought they were since the UN, right? I still like to believe in the UN as an idea, but clearly we no longer abide by those rules, by those principles. So I'm becoming a lot more pragmatic and trying to sort of frame my points as sort of like, how can the West modernize? How can we adapt? How can we still be an influential collective force whilst not coming across as completely hypocritical based on the past and what we've said and then actually done, or vice versa? So that's sort of where I'm coming at it from. You probably are sitting there, some of you thinking like, what is he talking about? But it makes sense to me. Basically, enough virtue signaling. If we're not going to follow through on what we say, then we shouldn't say it. Or we shouldn't try to preach things if we're not going to uphold them as in practice, is what I'm saying. You've heard me, James, Michael discuss these things in the past. Michael has his very strong views on certain issues. James is more of a classic liberal or multilateralist. I hope he's not watching and going to lose his shit for me mislabeling him. But I think, I want to believe in the system, but I also think we have to be very realistic now in what it is. The world is much more multipolar. I'm not going to argue that we are in a but I find that term completely overused, but the world is not what it was pre-2001, or when, the glory days of the 90s and liberal interventionism, and we will come in and we will democratize you. Like, no, none of that. But I'm not also a restrainer. I'm not an isolationist. I don't think that we should just sit down and allow threats wherever they come from. Like, we don't just sit down and stop with what Russia's doing. But yeah, it's a complicated one, and something that I'm going to be debating with, I'm sure, all of you in the comments and future live streams and things as we go into this year. But let's get through some more of these comments. EU needs to distance itself from the US and alliance with LATAM. I mean, they've been trying to do that, Ollie, to be honest. Thanks for your comments, by the way. I do see them. Yeah, they've been trying to do that. The EU has been trying to leverage its biggest comparative advantage, which is economics, with the Mercosur agreement. But that agreement has been ongoing for 30 years. Since the 90s, I believe, they started trying to get this free trade agreement, whatever, customs union, whatever it is. I can't remember the exact details of it, done. But that's my problem with the EU, which is because it's such a big entity, it's so slow, bureaucratic, and therefore it takes ages for things to get done. But in principle, yeah, I agree with you. Although a few countries in Latin America are a bit too communistic for me as well, socialistic. But according to Trump and Musk and anyone else, or MAGA, the EU is both fascist and communist simultaneously. I love comments from people in there. Anyway, let's keep going. Yeah, Monroe Doctrine is back. Yap. Okay, interesting. Yeah, exactly, Sean. You were the one who made me say my comments because I know that I worked at the World Bank, but trust me, I was frustrated by a lot of things in there. The World Bank has been a huge contributor to debt and loans and issues for the US, for the African states. The SAP programs, as they're known, or structural adjustment programs in the 1980s by the IMF and the World Bank, plunged so many African states into worse conditions. And, that's why so many African countries resent Western institutions, because they just see it as a form of neocolonialism. I completely understand that. But what I think is frustrating is then when they look at Russia or China as some kind of new alternative. What Russia's doing is just a neo form of colonialism as well. Sending in Wagner Group to uphold the security forces in Mali it's not much different. And as I made in another video, which you can find on the channel, about Russia's operations in Africa, they are going badly, very badly. So, yeah. Okay, let's keep going. There really is no international law. Not really. Well, I mean, international law is a very broad term. International maritime law, you would argue, exists, although the US did just breach that as well. Actually, no, forget that. Maritime law doesn't exist either. Oh dear. Yeah, no, it's a challenge, because I'm still in my sort of years of, I had one comment from someone once who was like, you're rose tinted, or your puppy dog, like you're so young, you're naive. And as you get older, you become more of a realist. You become tired and aware of the bullshit of the world, etc., etc. And it's like, it is sad, really, because I like to believe in the best of countries, but yeah, it's not. Yeah, no, I like to believe in the UN, as I say, as an idea, as a concept, but yeah, no, it's not. We can't kid ourselves, unfortunately. But as I say, my primary focus on this channel is now to think about how the West, whatever that means, moves from here. How do we rekindle some respect or patience amongst, especially the global South? I'm thinking about the global South. Some of you watching maybe from my Indian community, and many of you resent the West, understandably so. And then so I'm thinking of people from India, from parts of Southern Asia, Africa, who are fed up with these sorts of things, and sort of like, so therefore, how can the West modernize to better engage countries like that? Although I do have problems with Modi over his relationship with Putin, and the comments around the supposed Ukrainian attack on Putin's residence, when it was absolutely, without question, a false flag. But I'll leave that there. Wow, I've got so many comments. Guys, stop sending so many comments. I'm trying to get through them all. I hope you have some chill days. Yeah, I mean, my friend, I made this live stream for Iran yesterday, and I was like, oh, good, if we get to have some discussion around Iran. And then Trump undertakes Operation, whatever it is. I'm just going to call it Operation Resolute with Venezuela. Although I should actually point out, there's something about late night, overnight operations occurring on Friday night. They always occur on Friday and Saturday nights, because obviously military figures, personnel are not paying attention as much, especially this weekend, right? It's immediately after New Year's. Well, we saw this with the air defenses in Venezuela and Caracas. There were none, because they're all having a nap. They're all off, not thinking that anything's going to happen. So that's the perfect opportunity, let alone the weather conditions. So it's actually quite irritating to be a geopolitical I don't even know what to call myself. Commentator? I don't really like that word. To be someone who talks about geopolitics, economics, international relations, because it always happens at the most unsociable of hours. Friday night. Not that I'm some like alcoholic, but yeah. So that was quite annoying. But yeah, that is something I noted. Yeah, we've talked a lot about China and Taiwan, guys. I would, go back further in the video. I sort of laid out after the first 45 minutes of the Trump address, I gave a lot of my my summary. But yeah. Okay, that's interesting. The operation makes a similar op against Cuba and others less likely. It sends a message US is willing, able to react. Yeah, I suppose that's fair. That's a rock star comment, if you know what I mean. Okay, I'll start with the dad jokes. No, I like your classic game. We got Maduro captured and removed from power before we got GTA 6. Oh my god. I'm cool, guys. I'm trending now with what the cool peeps say. Will we get Cuban operation before we get GTA 6? No, I'm not hungover, mate. I just saw a comment. I'm not hungover. Actually, I've stopped drinking this year. Well, not stopped. I'm half Russian, and English. But I'm definitely reducing my alcohol intake. I'm quite a fitness nut. I really enjoy my fitness, my gym, my HIIT training. So actually, this is free advice for you guys. Do drink less. You don't need to go out and drink to have a good time. Everyone else was drinking their heads off yesterday, and I was swapping out one alcoholic drink for one soft drink. For me, it's not even about having to have alcohol. It's just I want something to drink, something in your hand. It's like why people smoke. They don't smoke because they want to smoke. It's just because they want something to do with their hands. It's like why I'm fiddling half the time with my hands on the stream. Anyway, a little bit of an insider background to me. Let's see. Land has been sold or conquered. Oh, actually, on that, let's talk about Russia and Trump's comments for a second. I thought that was quite interesting. Aside from the stupid question I ranted about earlier, Trump's pissed off with Putin, and I know some of you said, this is Trump. He'll go back to liking him tomorrow, but I don't know. I feel that, or maybe again, this is my wishful thinking, or more me hoping, but I shared it. Well, I've tweeted so much now about the shit in Venezuela that it's further down. But there was an interesting comment about this one. There we go. Yeah. So let me share this. I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about, but let me share this just to. So on the 31st of December, Trump, he shared this New York Times Post article that Putin attack blaster shows Russia is the one standing in the way of peace. Now, obviously, that's just the title or the tagline or whatever it is of the article itself. But the fact that Trump did share that, I think is quite interesting, because he didn't say, things are great. Oh, always time to talk about, always time to talk about Vladimir Putin, ha, joke. But then he was quick to pivot to be like, he's killing a lot of people. He's being an obstacle to peace. I think that's interesting. I do think that Trump might recognize that Putin is more of the obstacle to peace than Zelensky, mainly because Zelensky is bending over backwards to accommodate Trump's requests. Economic free zone, discussion more over security assurances. So again, I'm not getting ahead of myself in saying that suddenly he's pro-Ukraine. No, of course not. But I think it's interesting to see what is Trump going to turn his attention to now? Are we going to see a period of refocus on domestic affairs? Because to be honest with you, Trump hasn't really. I haven't seen much coverage of US domestic affairs. All of this is, as some of you keep posting in the comments, not just on the live stream, but in the videos I post, is this all just a distraction from the Epstein files? I don't go too much into the weeds of the Epstein files. I just I don't know. There's so much coverage about it. I don't feel that I need to, but like my point is like, is he going to put his focus back again on foreign policy or onto domestic issues for a bit? And if it's foreign policy, what's going to be his next focus? Iran? Back to Russia, Ukraine? Is he going to try and renegotiate peace in other conflicts? I'm trying to think of Cambodia and Thailand. No, they instigated a ceasefire. Yeah, so that's worth considering. I love reading the comments. You guys, some of you going at each other. Oh, what? Nice. Well, Empire 101. Is this Trump? Is this Trump Empire 101? Are you Trump with that tagline? Sorry. What's going on in Claudia Sheinbaum's? It's interesting, actually. I was having a blunt conversation with a couple of Mexican policy people. I'm in the touristy area of Mexico, but this time of year, people come down to this area for holidays, and the universe screaming to me that I'm supposed to be doing this professionally because the one people I could talk to in the entirety of the town that I'm staying in happen to be working in foreign policy in Mexico's government. Yeah, Mexicans are obviously, well, just on a side comment for a minute, Mexico is such a lovely country. The people are so friendly. I love the people. They're so friendly. They're so welcoming. They're so hospitable. And considering now what Trump's done in one Latin American country, it's going to be very interesting to know how another Latin American country feels about this, but also, you know, well, gringos, right? I think there was a comment even that said that. So, but yeah, I think Mexico is going to be watching this with a degree of alarmism. I think Claudia or Sheinbaum has done a decent job, to be honest. In the first, quarter of Trump's presidency, when tariffs were the primary attention, you know, there was a lot of emphasis around Canada, Mexico being targeted with whatever percentage it was. Mexico quickly fell out of the headlines because she did a good job. And she's, you know, I'm not going into her personal politics or outlooks. She probably isn't my first choice of her political ideology, but from what I understood from the foreign policy people I spoke to, like, no, there's this quiet, tacit approval, and I mean, I don't see Mexico's been quite compliant with Trump's demands over the southern border. A lot of Mexican law enforcement here, I've spoken to some people, like, they've really upped the game in terms of trying to clamp down. But obviously Trump has been frustrated with the fentanyl, but, you know, the whole thing with Venezuela is based on that. So could we see Trump sort of returning his attention to Mexico to try and hammer out the cartels a little bit more? It's possible. But I think Sheinbaum I think she's a pragmatist. And I think she'll be proactive in reflecting what's happened in the past 12 hours, and maybe, if anything, initiating engagement with the Trump administration. I'm not going to pretend I know on what grounds, but I think I think she will be trying to get ahead of what could be, you know, Trump's refocus on Mexico, which is obviously one of his main considerations of where drug trafficking and smuggling and all that legal migration comes through. So yeah, I think she's definitely going to be thinking about how she can how she responds to this in the interests of Mexico and to mitigate. I think she'll be looking at this from a sense of mitigation, risk mitigation. So yeah, but I'll let you know how more Mexicans feel when I go out later. Because as much as you guys probably think I could just do this all day, probably not. We will be having a live stream, probably with the usual suspects of James and Michael, the two liberals and a Marxist, in a few days, or maybe tomorrow. Yeah, maybe tomorrow, actually. Why not? Let's do it tomorrow. I'll message them and do it tomorrow. But yeah. Let's see what other comments we have here. Yeah, so a lot of you wondering about China and Taiwan. Now, to be clear from my perspective, I studied strategic studies or great power politics. So when I look at Russia, Ukraine, I do look at it in the context of Taiwan, China, and just generally how big are powers. I know some of you will disagree with my, reference of Russia's great power, whatever, but like, basically, I think it's incredibly important to understand how the countries that have the most economic, military, whatever power in the world interact, because they can quickly, as we've seen in the past 12 hours now, dictate terms very quickly. And I was reading one interesting article a few days ago discussing the difference between great power competition and great power politics. Now, some of you might be thinking, what the hell is he talking about? What's the difference? But there is. Well, I mean, maybe it's evident, but like great power politics is the broader encompassing school of thought or focus area of study versus great power competition, which is a subset of that. So the great power politics is what we're seeing now, which is that Trump is much more wanting to just sort of agree with the other great powers, whoever you determine that to be, in terms of how they divvy up the world, right? I've used sometimes in my videos an image of President Xi, Putin, Trump at the table around the globe, or at a table with a globe in the middle. And they're sort of like cutting it up like it's a big cake, right? This one I'm thinking of from the Financial Times. It's a good demonstration of what I mean. This thing, because in the past, from Gideon Ratman, of course, but I think this image encapsulates where we are now, which is that in the past 10, 15 years, great power competition was the primary determinant. The great powers were competing for power in Asia, in Africa. Now, I think that competition is just being replaced with a lot more, well, just the politics. That politics can be competitive. It can also be coordinated. It can be cordial, coherent. So that is very much the case. And so where I'm going with all of this is that I think that the US is, wait, hang on. It was this one. Yeah, sorry. I thought I'm really bad at showing the tabs. Sorry, everyone. This is the image I mean. And Gideon is I don't know if you guys know who Gideon is. I think he's a very astute commentator from the Financial Times. But yeah, he wrote this article back in February of 25, and I think it's very acute. So anyway, point I'm making is that right now, a lot of what China is determining about Taiwan is based on these great power politics. So yeah, it's something that I'm definitely going to be doing more of. Much of the channel has focused explicitly on Russia, Ukraine, but China is something that I am very fascinated by. As with every conversation we have, nearly almost every time, one question or part of the conversation will gravitate towards China. Russia and Ukraine in the context of China, America and Europe in the context of China. So very much that's going to be something that we're doing more as we go on the channel. And if you are from China or you are from the Asian theater, Indo-Pacific, as the late Prime Minister of Japan called it, then yeah, join the community if you want. But let's keep going. Oh my God, there's so many comments. How many of you watching? Oh wow, there's so many people watching. 2,000 people. Wow, that's a lot. Okay, well, cool guys. Nice to meet you all. I don't think so. I don't think Russia's going to, well, define lifeline. Well, the government to escape now. The Russians don't have, again, the capacity. Although if they lose Cuba, will they draw a line and get involved? But what does that mean? Well, the Russians are going to start sending naval assets to defend an island across the other side of the world. The Russians don't have a navy. Half of it's on the bottom of the Black Sea. taken out by a country that genuinely doesn't have a navy. So I don't think so, like not in any physical sense. Could Maduro spin the spectacle of his show? Oh yeah, of course. As I said yesterday on a space, like, look at what Iran, North Korea, the Sahel states, they're spinning this all already. That this is a demonstration of near-imperialism. That the United States is as hypocritical as the West, as those it seeks to criticize. And so Maduro will say that he is unlawfully being convicted or tried, indicted, and that the US is a lawless, rogue state, risking and threatening or jeopardizing international peace and security and the rules-based order. Wait for it. That's what they'll say. China's already said something similar, right? So yeah, of course he will try to spin it. But what I don't know is how much time he's actually going to have to speak. Like he said, he's going to be tried in New York. He's currently on his way, but I don't think so. All right, guys, it's 2:00. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go for another 15 minutes. Make this a sort of just over 2.5 hour stream, which would be about sort of 1 hour 40 because it was a large proportion was Trump. I might cut that out, actually. Shall I cut that out? Maybe. But anyway, yeah, Russia is cooked. Let's keep going for a little bit. Now, when I hear military action, I think of jousting. This is something that I think, I don't know if I mentioned this yet, but I do want to come back to this, which is regime change versus leadership change. I think I covered this earlier on in the stream, but like right now you've got a problem in that they only took out Maduro or removed him. Now you've got a government who says it's going to work with the US, but you've also got an opposition. You've got basically things are not going to be easy for the Venezuelan people now. You've got a country that's going to be administered somehow by the US, but there's still going to be internal divisions and therefore instability. And so, yeah, I think it's it's unfinished. And sure, some of you might argue, well, it's not finished because they are getting started on the economic and political front. But, Colombia has also made it clear that they're not very happy. And there's a lot of relationship between Venezuela and Colombia for different reasons across the border. So I need to learn more about the VP. What I'm going to do is once after this stream, I'm going to chat with some Venezuelan friends or colleagues who I know more about this than I do in terms of who remains, who are who's who, what that means. Because relative to, say, the sort of theocracy of Iran, Venezuela is sort of supposed to be more of a conventional government, right? President, prime minister, defense minister, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to be interesting to see who out of these remaining actors comes forward as some of the most prominent. I think the interior minister, defense minister are a couple of the most important. But yeah, there's that. So yeah, that sort of this question actually leads to it. How do they do that without some forces on the ground? I mean, that is a key point. Who's going to be like people who know more about this, as I say, than I do, emphasized that Maduro's most inner circle or security detail were Cuban. They're not Venezuelan because the Cubans are obviously incredibly well trained at this for the past 70 years of dealing with the US embargo and so on. So what is the sentiment amongst the Venezuelan military? What is the sentiment amongst the intelligence services or security services, etc.? How's that going to differ yeah, I think that's a really good question about how do you actually enforce that? Because another statement that Trump said caught my ear was, we're not fearful of boots on the ground. Okay, hang on. You said that you were against military action. And I mean, military action in a airstrike is one thing, but military action with actual physical boots on the ground, that's gearing towards state building. Like, depending upon the style that the Trump administration seeks to do in Venezuela, we're sort of reverting to state interventionism. That's no different to what George Bush did in Afghanistan and Iraq. So again, this is speculation, but if he's insinuating that they're actually going to put American forces on the ground in Venezuela, that's not really that different. I hope he's bluffing, but the one distinction in all of this is that people were sort of drawing parallels with Afghanistan and Iraq. Venezuela is much more developed. I mean, it's gone incredibly backwards. Unfortunately, the economy is in bad shape, but the remnants of the previous economy, in terms of the infrastructure, the amount of people integrated into the international economy, like telecoms and stuff, is different, right? So it's not going to be quite the same, even if it is state building as sort of in Afghanistan, where you're literally having to build an entire city. Caracas is a pretty cosmopolitan, bustling city. So I think that's quite different. We know how it looks, Peter. Okay, I'm not sure what that means. Although that was a while ago. Wow, I'm so far down. Okay, let's jump here. All right, well, with that, should we do a little bit of Iran? Should we cover Iran a little bit, ladies and gentlemen? Because I think that's what some of you joined for me to talk about. So, that's a great segue, isn't it? What a great pivot. Iran, Venezuela. So, some of you may know, I don't know, I'm sort of readjusting my shirt here. Also, I did find this shirt. I think I did, so I can link it for some of you who said you like it. Christmas present from my family, actually, so that's why I'm wearing it. But I was wearing it for my Christmas and New Year's celebrations, but I decided to wear it partially as a celebration for Maduro, but also just because, wow, you guys get to enjoy me looking snazzy. Anyway, Iran, Venezuela, very interesting relationship. I'm not saying I'm an expert. I'm not going to go in intricate details here, but it's very interesting, the relationship between these two countries. I think it was either 2 or 3 years ago, the two signed a strategic partnership, which was at the time, randomly, it sort of caught some people off guard, like out of the blue. It sort of came out of nowhere, which I think is interesting. But it demonstrates also that, especially since October 7th and the and subsequent events since then, the Venezuelans have been receiving a lot of militia, especially from Hezbollah. And there's been a lot of discussions around sort of Hezbollah helping train Venezuelan forces or paramilitia. And generally, there was sort of some discussions about Venezuela being a refuge for the Islamic Republic in the future, which goes back to a point I made early on in this stream that Trump targeted Venezuela maybe because then it means the Islamic Republic has less options. But anyway, also, the two have worked together on disinformation or dissenting sort of interferences in their respective spheres of influence. The Iranians have been instrumental in helping elevate Venezuela's sort of how do you call it, like what's the word, covert operations, the nefarious activities, illicit activities, things like that. Russia, Iran, Venezuela have been fundamental in expanding the shadow fleet, which some of you who watch the Ukraine videos will be well aware of. And yeah, that's about as much as I can say realistically on that bilateral relationship, because it's not something I explicitly cover. They've often supported one another in the UN Security Council votes or General Assembly when one has been sanctioned. Venezuela obviously put a strongly worded statement, whatever that means. But it was always difficult really for Venezuela to be fully part of this axis, because just geography. Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, China with an asterisk always, were the center of this, anti-American or alternative to the West world order. But Venezuela was there. They were there on the sort of, if they were the sort of core four, and on the secondary tier, Venezuela, Cuba, maybe Niger, Burkina Faso, there's lots of countries with dissenting views of the US and so on. But they could never fully engage in that because just of geography. But also BRICS. Some of you who know how much I talk about BRICS remain relatively lukewarm about it. But Venezuela, or Maduro, was very keen on joining BRICS. Sahel coup belt, yes. They were very keen on joining BRICS, and Brazil was quite keen for them to join, I think, although he was critical of Maduro's actions against Guyana, which I will come to in just a second, actually. That was reminded me of something which I think is worth discussing briefly. But Venezuela is very interested in BRICS Plus and this idea of this new world order, post-American, post-Pax Americana, the dollar reserve currency, all that sort of stuff. But again, they had a hard time leveraging it. So that's as far as I can really say about the Iranian-Venezuelan relationship. But just one point on Venezuela and Guyana. So at the end of 2023, I believe, Maduro was hinting at the idea of military action against Guyana. So let me bring up a map for this. I'm a geographer, I love my maps. Squibo, how do you spell that? So, yeah, in late 2023, there was a lot of rumblings of a military potential buildup by the Venezuelan military. And that was because there were some people speculating that the Maduro government wanted to invade, that they wanted to annex it. So let me share my screen. So this is a post from, December 2nd, 2023. So what you're looking at here is, that's Venezuela to your left. This whole territory is known as Guyana, a former English colony, one of the few only English actually colonies. These three countries are fascinating for their just random geopolitical and historical relationship to the rest of Latin America. But anyway, that's why it's called Georgetown, because it's British. But yes, this is Essequibo, disputed territory. This, Guyana's exclusive economic zone. Venezuela's claims at the time of their territorial waters, because they claim, therefore, Essequibo. Now, the Starbarek block is a incredibly abundant oil oil area. I can't think of the right word. Oil zone thing. Can't think of the right area. Sorry, I'm getting that second wave of tiredness. But basically, in 2015, ExxonMobil discovered a huge amount of oil reserves. That's the word. Oil reserves in Guyana, off the coast of Guyana. And this meant that, well, I'll just show you this here. So this meant they discovered over 11 billion barrels of oil equivalent, making it one of the world's largest reserves. And obviously, this consortium of ExxonMobil, Hess, or Chevron now, and others was incredibly annoying for the Maduro government, for, well, lots of entities that the Americans had discovered it, and so American corporations were managing that. So this covers 6.6 million hectares. Production, so it increased rapidly from 2019, from zero in 2019, so 4 years after they discovered it, to 900,000 barrels a day in 2025, aiming for more than double that, almost double that, by 2030. The rate at which it had an impact on Guyana economic growth is insane. Some of you may have seen, yeah, this is what I wanted to show you as well. There's a reason I'm coming to all this. In 2024, Guyana was the fastest, or it has been the fastest growing economy for, I think, at least 4 years. Some of you asked about Mexico. Well, Mexico was growing reasonably well, I think, prior to the tariffs this year. But look at this, right? If we look at China and think, oh, I wish I had that 5% growth. Guyana had 44% growth in a year because of the impact of this oil. Now, of course, that impact of that oil is not equal. It doesn't trickle down into the economy equally. But the point is that Guyana has gone from being a largely irrelevant or forgotten about country to incredible growth and the focus, attention, attraction of so many oil companies. And where I'm going with this is that you now have the removal of one of the biggest obstacles to Trump's completely shameless interest in the oil industries of Venezuela, but also, therefore, this area of Guyana. So are we going to see a contention between the Trump administration and Guyana as well? Or are we simply going to see the US basically combine that that block, the Shiano block? Hang on, I'll bring up the image again. I guess I should just keep my screen open. It's easier. Like, are we just going to see this area just combined through infrastructure? Because Exxon is obviously the main company that's going to go in, Chevron as well. That duopoly is going to go in there completely, to quote unquote use Trump's words, re-industrialize or modernize the systems in Venezuela. But are they going to connect it up to the Stabroek block? Does that mean anything for this disputed territory? Or, I mean, this is mainly jungle, so I don't personally think so in that regard. But it just something to keep, just something to think about. Like, it's not over, and this could become a transnational issue, which puts the U.S. administration in an even more criticized position than it was before. But yeah, I think that's really interesting, and a little bit of a tidbit, which I haven't seen anyone else really consider or talk about yet. But yeah, let's talk Iran for a few minutes. So Iran, I think, is facing a perfect storm of issues. I think that the situation in Iran is increasingly untenable. Let me just update this to the right thing. Iran protests day 7. I mean, is that going to change? Oh, for fuck's sake! The stream is so restrictive. So I use StreamYard and it's so restrictive. It won't allow you to change the stream. Whatever. Okay. Well, we're talking about we're talking about Iran, people, if you're joining in and out, but this is now, yeah, it was about Venezuela. I want to talk about Iran because that's what the original stream was about. Very simply, I think Iran is facing a perfect storm of a few things. One, of course, the international system is completely different to a couple of years ago. The Iranians have had their proxy network largely dismantled. Hezbollah exists, but it's a husk of its former self. They can't even do stuff in Lebanon. The Russians completely bogged down in Ukraine. It all sort of it does connect to what I've been talking about. We've talked about a hell of a load of things in this stream. But like, Russia is so bogged down, it's not going to come to the aid of Iran. It can't. It just physically can't. It's not going to come to the aid of Syria. Why? How is it going to come to the aid of Iran? What, you're going to send Wagner troops to protect the mullahs in Tehran? Yeah, okay. Although maybe actually, if they did that, maybe that would dissuade the American administration from bombing them. I don't know. I'm not pretending to be eloquent in my military assessments right now. Point is, I personally think it's very unlikely Trump would come to the aid of Russia would come to the aid of Iran if the situation escalates. China is never going to do anything. We already said they're not going to do anything over Venezuela. They're not going to do anything over Iran. China doesn't care who runs what country as long as they get what they need from their respective countries. They don't care whether Putin's in power as long as Russia provides the energy and sort of, support that it does. I mean, I think they prefer Putin because he's a known entity. But the Chinese are pragmatists and long-term strategists, and they're not going to care about whether the mullahs manage Iran or whatever, unless there is a fundamental shift and, Reza Pahlavi, the crown prince, takes over and he sort of wants to, do that to the Chinese, but I don't think he would do that either. Then, of course, there's the internal situation. Something that I put in my video that you can find, if you want, the actual video on Iran, which I didn't mention, but you guys pointed out, which is fair, is the water crisis. The water crisis in Iran is terrible, or just the general food, aquatic, water insecurity. There's a huge array of environmental associated issues that are bringing Iranians to the streets. And that then leads into the other point, which is the economy. Of course, Iran has always had a difficult situation because of the economy, because of the sanctions, and so they've been discontent. Now, there are some people who are wondering whether this has been an orchestrated thing by Israel, by America, Mossad, all that sort of stuff. I mean, no one. It's difficult to ever put anything past Western intelligence or American and Israeli intelligence services, well, as we've seen in the past 12 hours. But I don't think so. My gut instinct doesn't tell me that this has been deliberately orchestrated initially. Are they going to jump on it now that it's been going on? Yes, of course. They may well do. Sow more seeds of discontent. But I don't think this was originally driven by the Israelis or Americans or something. But that's the point, which is that Iran has never been this vulnerable before. And the economy, if you can't manage the economy, then even the more moderate or indifferent parts of the population are going to get frustrated and stand up or emphasize their dissatisfaction. So if there ever was going to be a subsequent intervention, I'm not pretending to know what or call it any particular word, by the Israelis, Americans, whatever, it would be now. I don't think right now. I think they're going to let the resistance protests, grow, ferment, if that's the right word. But, over time, they may well see this as an opportunity to try and take out the leadership. My biggest concern, though, is that other than the Crown Prince, or Reza Pahlavi, who doesn't represent every Iranian. I think we should be clear on that. There are plenty of people who do support him, but there's plenty of people who don't, or don't care about him. Other than him, from the diaspora, I don't know in Iran who would lead this, who is the figurehead of this resistance movement. And that's the problem that we've seen in previous iterations, that because you don't have a clear resistance movement, right? You don't have a Che Guevara, you don't have someone who collectively brings the masses together. It can be difficult to sustain these movements. It is different because they are in the city centers, not just in the rural areas. So there's a lot more cohesion across the country. But that is just a consideration. It's not a criticism necessary. It's just a point of consideration that we should keep in mind. The other thing I did want to share with you, actually, though, is the relationship of the monarchy to other Iranians, or sort of basically, how do Iranians feel? So, for context, this organization, the Middle East Institute, is a Western organization. It's based in Washington, D.C. So I'm not going to pretend that there may be some biases here, but I thought this polling was quite interesting because it didn't just show polling that was pro-monarchy or anti the mullahs or something. It reflected quite a nuanced picture, which some people won't like. But yeah, this was in the aftermath of the election in 2024 when Raisi, the former president, was killed in a helicopter crash, and his successor was chosen. Now, firstly, the turnout. Now, obviously, as I say, conditions have changed. This isn't meant to represent current feelings, but I think it gives us a good understanding of that things are not as simple as the loudest voices will make them out to be. There are a lot of people on the internet, on the channels that are, simply cheerleading one side. And whilst I have my preferences in certain issues, as I think has been made clear today, I like to try to distinguish between that by looking at what the actual data shows, not just saying, oh, the facts, so my truth. No, numbers, maths is the universal language of everybody, and they don't lie. So let's have a look here. Point being is that the Iranians had half the country didn't even turn out to vote. So clearly there is a lot of resentment, skepticism, indifference about the political situation, the political conditions of Iran, or has been for a while. Although this was done, as they say here, the proportion of undecided voters would have decreased in the final days. So, okay, so basically, though, a good proportion of the Iranian population at this time were largely politically apolitical or politically inactive. Although that's the case in many Western states as well. We can look at the UK and the election turnout there. That was abysmal. So, and the other thing about Iranians, as many people often like to emphasize, is they tend to be very well educated, just generally, very politically aware or just aware of current events. So as you can see, 51% of citizens know exactly when the presidential election is. I don't think that would be even a third of that, or maybe 2/3 of that in the UK. People don't even know the name of the prime minister half the time because he's so boring and lame. So it shows you that even if there isn't a high turnout, sometimes people are politically aware of the names of the relevant people. But this is where I wanted to, not so much the turnout, but more sort of. So again, this is the views of the predecessor of the current president. So people, despite what you said about what people say, that Raisi was hated amongst many Iranians, the stats don't demonstrate that actually. 52%, actually no, 66%. 66% of Iran's population had a more than favorable than neutral view of Raisi. Now, my personal opinion is I don't like him. I don't like the Islamic Republic. But according to this data, at least, that isn't the sentiment shared amongst many Iranians. And in the Islamic Republic, you have moderates. Well, supposedly you're supposed to have more moderates or reformers and hardliners. Raisi has been at least coined in the West as a hardliner because he rejected the JCPOA, the nuclear deal with the US and Europe, versus Rouhani, who was his predecessor, who negotiated the peace deal, the deal with nuclear deal with the West. The incumbent president is seen again as a bit more of a reformer, or sort of more moderate, and sort of people argue that this is reflected because he's taken a more conciliatory tone already versus what Raisi has done in the past, or did in the past, of trying to appease or calm the protesters. So I think that's really interesting. Now, more specifically, people were very, as I say, 52%, so 66%. Now, if you look at specific issues, it does vary quite a lot here. Overall, 52%, 38% on corruption plus 18, so that's 56. So again, more than 50% still supported Raisi's former handling of the government's internal corruption. Foreign policy is interesting because that's the first notable reduction. Well, I guess they're all going down, but that's the biggest other than freedom of political liberties, foreign policy. So clearly more Iranians are conflicted about how they feel about Iran's foreign policy versus the domestic issues. Like a lot more completely disapprove of his management of the economy and the youth. So the clamping down of protesters against Mahsa Amini. So, for example, so there's quite a lot of variability in the Iranian people's views of the government. And I know it's been now a year or so since more than a year since that change, but the essence of what I'm trying to get through with this, look at all this. I mean, look at all this. Wow. I'm not going to go through all of that. I'll go through a couple in a second. But the emphasis that I'm trying to make for you here is that it's not as simple as every Iranian supports the monarchy or a return to the monarchy. And not everyone likes the Islamic Republic, but doesn't dislike it enough that they want to go out and reject it outright through protests. It's much more nuanced than that. The loudest voices are often the ones with the strongest opinions. And it's the silent majority that you should always look at. The most important issues here, right? Again, keeping in mind when this was conducted, unemployment, cost of living, inflation, housing. What are those things? They are all economic. So as with everything, and as I said at the beginning of the video I made yesterday, the primary discontent the Iranian people have is around the state of economy, not so much around the oppression of them or the lack of liberties vis-a-vis the West or relationship to the West. Foreign policy is not important. Youth is high, but that's because particularly in the way that the morality police dealt with protesters at the time. And certainly not, marriage is up there, like greater perhaps political freedoms. But it's all largely to do with corruption, mismanagement, inflation, cost of living, economic and monetary and fiscal policy matters, not social or cultural. So again, I'm not saying that the protesters right now aren't angry, and I'm not saying that there is not any support for a change in the government, but does it mean a complete, and it's kind of ironically, it brings us back around to what we were talking about with Venezuela. Is it a complete regime change? Or is it more just of a leadership change? You know, are they quite happy with this structure of the supreme leader? Or do they want a younger supreme leader? Do they want a different prime minister, a president now? It's worth considering. So you're gonna, you know, some of you who may be watching this thinking that I'm being too, I don't know, giving too many sort of excuses or something. It's not like that. I'm just trying to be objective here in what we see going on. There's a strong rejection of the usage of hijab or penalties on the hijab based on location, interestingly, very much based on, completely disagree based on education. So the more educated you are, the more you disagree with it. So hijab should be optional. Look at that. That's split. That's quite interesting, actually. I haven't seen that statistic. So yeah, the Iranian population is quite split. Clearly, you've got some people who want more liberties, and others who are pretty hardline. So, referendum, national referendum on what? Wow. Okay, so that's a pretty big. You know, they want more power in the hands of the people, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they want that power in the form of a monarchy. But anyway, guys, that's quite a comprehensive bit of data there, maths, nerd, and things like that. Some of you still going at it around, yes, I know, this is no longer the Monroe Doctrine, this is the Don Roe Doctrine. Very good. But yeah, you love a good chart. I love a good chart as well, my friend. Where are you, Charm? Charm loves their chants, everyone. I understand your point about puppets of the Ayatollahs, but I understand it's difficult to take any face value of what the data says in something like Iran. But I still think it doesn't dispute the point that things are never as simple as one or the other. It's very much a gray area, and that's more what I'm just trying to emphasize in this segment on Iran. I fully support the Iranian people's choice to determine their own government, but it's not as simple as they're all after a monarchy. Personally, I would be quite interested to see what a constitutional monarchy would look like in Iran. I would have loved a constitutional monarchy in Russia, but after the Romanovs were killed by the Bolsheviks, we're left with the despot warmonger that is in power. But anyway, guys, with that, I want to say thank you very much for watching. If you have for nearly 3 hours, a good 45, 50%, 50 minutes of that was Trump. But I am very impressed with my capacity to talk. And some of you may drop in the comments out of your ass, but no, it's been very much enjoyable doing one of these streams. I don't do these often because I find them quite exhausting. I'm also not as slick with like changing the cameras and the screens. If I do live streams, I like it with other people because I think it's more dynamic, and it means that whilst they debate, I can sort of do things in the background whilst if I'm having to talk to you guys. And as Diane says, thank you. Hit the like button before you go. Do subscribe. We did reach 100,000 in December, which was, wow, I never thought I'd do that. Really amazing. So thank you, those of you who've joined since as well, another like 5,000 or something of you. I will be doing more coverage of Iran. I will be doing more coverage of Russia, Ukraine, obviously, but I am going to be introducing more things in terms of China, specifically China. I will be returning to Sudan periodically. I do want to do a video on Myanmar. I've got a lot of things, and of course, more collaborations on the way. And lastly, actually, I do want to give a shout out to me. No, in the sense of my Substack, because I have reactivated, if you like, my Substack. It's been a little bit neglected, but if you guys want deeper dives, such as what I'll be writing on Iran, Venezuela, sorry, in the next few days, then do check out the Global Gambit. Hang on, let me change that one. It's that one. There we go. Oh God, I'm loud. Oh my God, am I on? Oh, I see. I'm on that. There we go. Okay, so yeah, this is the global gambit you can see here. It's sort of like cool, right? Anyway, if you want to subscribe to that, it's free, you know, there's no things, but I am actively working on growing that and deepening my analysis in written format. So if you like reading as well, then do join that. I've also got the clips channel where I'm posting clips, segments of things that I say or interviews with people, which you can join. And yeah, thanks very much, guys. Have a great rest of your weekend. Good luck out there. I don't really know how to sign this off after what we're seeing, but I mean, we're all in it together, and yeah, be safe, but be aware, and well, maybe see you tomorrow. Take care, everyone. Oh, I forgot to do my